In this world, healers are categorized into 3 tiers, yet one enigmatic unlicensed healer operates in the shadows. Renowned for his unparalleled abilities and ever surrounded by women, he offers his services without hesitation, provided the price meets his exacting standards. The young elf girl awakens, greeting Xenos before heading to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Moments later, Xenos rises, reciprocates her greeting, and settles down with a cup of black tea. According to Lily, healers fall into 3 classifications. Third-class healers mend wounds. Second-class healers provide both healing and solace, while first-class healers elevate society itself. The Kingdom of Heath holds healers in the highest regard, as their contributions have been instrumental in its advancement. Within the grand halls of the hospital, aspiring healers gather to master intricate healing magic and earn their licenses before embarking on their journey. In a secluded corner of the kingdom, a healer exists outside the constraints of formal education and licensure. Despite this, his skills are unparalleled. After treating another patient, Xenos accepts gratitude and payment. However, upon seeing the meager coins before him, he calmly reminds the man that he heals all, so long as they can meet his price. Once the patient departs, Lily recalls her scheduled house visit. Xenos instructs her to return by nightfall, and with that, the elf commits to preparing dinner in his absence. Left alone, Lily kindles the fire, chopping carrots and simmering them in a pot. The aroma soon draws Carmilla, who curiously peers over, eager for a taste. Knowing her enthusiasm, Lily reassures her. After all, she's training to become Xeno's wife one day. Trusting her, Carmilla nods and retreats to the bedroom, lazily flitting off to take a nap. Moments later, a woman named Zofia enters, searching for the healer. Upon learning he's out on a house call, she decides to wait. With her sharp, serrated teeth hinting at her shark-like nature, she had hoped to claim Xeno's attention for herself. But alas, fortune does not always favor desire. As the scene unfolds, Linga arrives, searching for the most coveted healer among the women of Heath. Lily delivers the usual notice, prompting the Catwoman to sigh in disappointment. She had hoped for the pleasure of basking in Xeno's attention, perhaps with a tail stroke for good measure. Before she can lament further, Zofia smugly reminds her that she arrived first and suggests she return home. A silent battle of intense glares ensues until Lily, unwilling to be left out, joins in. Just then, another arrival shatters the tension. Loa bursts through the door, loudly announcing her intent to play doctor with the doctor. Lily, unfazed, informs her of Xeno's absence and promptly orders her to fix the door she just wrecked. As the women gather, Loa assumes they've all come for Lily's cooking, but Zofia scoffs, insisting only someone as towering as Loa would do that. Meanwhile, Lily discreetly retrieves her secret ingredient and stirs it into the pot before inviting everyone to dine. Loa, catching on to the plan, grins. It was all leading to this anyway. Zofia concedes since she's already there, and Linga eagerly declares she won't be holding back. With anticipation building for the shared meal, Lily tends to the laundry she washed earlier. Meanwhile, Zofia groans, the aroma is torture, and Linga struggles to resist until dinner is served. Elle and Linga waste no time, rushing to the pot for an early taste. The moment the rich flavors hit their tongues, their restraint crumbles. With shameless abandon, they abandon all decorum and descend upon the pot, devouring its contents. Watching in amusement, Zofia warns that Lily won't take kindly to this. But as the aroma fully registers, her curiosity gets the better of her. Deciding to judge for herself whether the meal meets the doctor's standards, she too indulges. Meanwhile, outside, Lily enjoys a tranquil moment among nature's creatures. The peaceful harmony soothes her, prompting her to recline on the grass, savoring the serenity. She idly wonders if Xenos will return early. Back in the kitchen, the so-called Hersey Sweetheart trio has committed the ultimate crime, emptying the entire pot meant for dinner. Without hesitation, Linga shifts the blame onto the others, prompting Loa to do the same. Zofia eyes them both skeptically, questioning their sudden bout of amnesia. The Catwoman, ever the opportunist, agrees. Pretending to forget seems like the best course of action. Loa suggests cooking more, an idea Zofia deems reasonable, except it's already too late. Lily enters, exuding the calm she carried from the yard. With a polite but pointed tone, she demands to know what happened. The guilty trio, now seated at the table, feigns innocence, insisting they had just arrived. Patience thinning, Lily slams her palm against the table, repeating her question. Finally, Zofia caves, confessing that the irresistible aroma led her astray. Linga defends herself, claiming her hands acted on their own, while Loa, ever straightforward, simply admits the food was just too good. Noticing Lily's rising frustration, the trio huddles together, quickly agreeing. She's genuinely furious. Linga worries their digestion will suffer, while Loa half-jokingly suggests consulting Xenos. Zofia, however, dismisses the idea, deeming it absurd to trouble the doctor over such nonsense. Unfortunately, Linga's tail fur feels rougher than usual, though she secretly hopes Xenos will stroke it as always. Zofia scoffs, claiming the healer is more likely to inject mayonnaise into his veins than entertain such a request. Linga counters, accusing her of jealousy. Loa chimes in, insisting if anyone should be envious, it's Zofia, of her perfectly sculpted physique. Linga, unimpressed, argues that Xenos would favor a soft furry tail 1,000 times over. Growing exasperated, Zofia reminds them they've lost sight of the issue. In response, Linga bluntly calls her a big lizard. Without missing a beat, Zofia fires back, labeling Linga a little dog. Loa, feeling left out of the exchange, pouts over being excluded from the string of gratuitous insults. Lily finally intervenes, making it clear Xenos will be far more upset if they keep bickering. All she had wanted was a simple meal shared with her friends. Faced with her heartfelt words, Zofia lowers her head in guilt, offering an apology. Linga follows suit, promising to help prepare another meal, with Loa echoing the sentiment. Unfortunately, Lily laments, they've already used up all the ingredients. At that moment, another figure steps forward, her tone sharp as she questions the troubling statement. Linga stiffens, immediately dropping to her knees before Carmilla, the ghostly entity who had been eagerly anticipating Lily's cooking only to learn it had vanished before her arrival. Perhaps, Carmilla muses, another stew should be made, this time with a broth rich in soul essence for added flavor. The other two culprits quickly follow Linga's lead, kneeling before her in silent apology. Lily, however, proposes a less menacing alternative, gathering fresh ingredients. Predictably, the trio of insatiable food lovers latches onto this idea, rushing off to fulfill the request. Watching them scurry away, Carmilla turns to Lily, questioning why she wasn't angrier. The elf merely smiles, revealing her serenity. If, however, they had dared to touch Carmilla's prized beverages, she would have cursed them all without hesitation. Lily chuckles, explaining that she prefers to remain composed. She values their time together far more than fleeting frustrations. Her real concern lies in whether she can finish cooking before Xenos returns. Meanwhile, as dusk settles over the city, Xenos strides through the streets. A girl stumbles past him, visibly in pain, her breath labored. Before he can react, a man with a sinister tone emerges behind her, his gaze predatory. He sneers, claiming to have searched everywhere for her. The girl, trembling, protests. She had merely gone to the hospital for a stomachache, only to be turned away, denied treatment for lacking the necessary coin. The man seizes the girl by her hair, his voice laced with contempt. A mere stomachache, he sneers, is no excuse for a slave to shirk her duties. Without hesitation, he drags her away. At the desolate cemetery, he hurls her onto a weathered tombstone, filthy, cracked, and in his mind, fitting for a semi-human like her. Unbeknownst to him, a shadow stirs from the grave, silently slipping into the girl's body. Disgust curling his lips, the man delivers a brutal kick to her abdomen before turning away, muttering that she'll eat only if she proves her worth. But before he can take another step, she rises. A feral energy surges through her frame, distorting her silhouette. Without warning, she lunges, rending his stomach open with unnatural force, her body pulsating with newfound power. Realizing the horror unfolding, the man stumbles through the ruins of the city, his screams for help piercing the night, until fate leads him straight to Xenos. Desperate, he begs for intervention. But Xenos remains unmoved, condemning the man's selfishness. Stammering, the man insists he was merely performing his duties, hastily spinning a tale about agriculture to downplay the situation. Yet as he clutches his wounds, offering payment in exchange for aid, the beast girl emerges once more, her vengeance far from over. Xenos shoves the wounded aristocrat aside, ensuring he doesn't perish just yet. With a wry smirk, he asks what provoked the girl's fury, only to sidestep a stone she hurls at him. Her master, still reeling, demands Xenos eliminate her. He refuses. Killing isn't his profession. Infuriated, the noble protests, how could an aristocrat like him meet his end over something so trivial? Slaves are replaceable, he could simply purchase another. That remark triggers something deep within Xenos, dragging him into a painful memory. He snaps back, declaring his duty is to save lives, not take them. The beast girl, blinded by rage, heaves a boulder at him. Unfazed, Xenos channels mana into his fist, shattering it midair. Stunned, the noble stammers, what kind of healer possesses such power? The girl darts across the battlefield with unnatural speed, even by her race's standards. But Xenos, unfazed, conjures a magic shield, deflecting her strike and redirecting her into a crumbling house. The weakened structure collapses, burying the noble beneath the rubble. With the conflict settled, Xenos approaches the demi-human, offering a hand. But she recoils, paralyzed by fear. Worse still, the malevolent force within her flares once more, enveloping her in a sinister aura. Xenos quickly discerns that the girl is possessed. Without hesitation, he thrusts his arm into her mouth, channeling his healing magic to purge the invading spirit. As he eradicates the malevolent entity, he contemplates what kind of agriculture involves servants being seized by the dead. With the corruption vanquished, he mends the girl's broken leg in mere seconds. Emerging from the wreckage, the aristocrat watches in astonishment, realizing the doctor's power. Desperate, he begs for treatment. Xenos, unfazed, coolly remarks that his shift has ended and suggests returning tomorrow. Panicked, the noble protests by then he'll be dead. He demands immediate care. The doctor names his price. Piles of gold are surrendered, yet Xenos remains unimpressed. As an unlicensed underground healer, his services come at a different cost. Instead, he demands the noble's slave as compensation. The aristocrat, having no better choice, concedes. Once healed, he limps away, while Xenos takes the beast girl home. There he informs her of the transaction and asks for her name. Till, she mutters hesitantly. Without preamble, Xenos instructs her to undress. He needs to assess her condition. After a moment's hesitation, she complies. Observing her, he quickly identifies the source of her suffering. A gallstone causing severe inflammation. With a swift touch, he heals her entirely. Till, wide-eyed, stares in disbelief. No incantation, no magic circle, just sheer inexplicable power. Grateful for her recovery, Till expresses her thanks, but Xenos expects more than mere gratitude. When she assures him she'll do whatever he asks, he hands her a notebook and instructs her to find something specific. Without hesitation, she sets out and soon discovers the exact plant he had been searching for. Uncertain if her task is truly complete, Till assumes there must be more to do. However, Xenos assures her that her work is finished. Still perplexed, she insists she remains in his debt, yet the doctor reiterates that their transaction is settled. He demands fair compensation for his services and ensures the same fairness in return. In her case, retrieving the rare leaves he couldn't obtain himself equated to the value of the treatment he provided. Their debts were now balanced. With that, Xenos tears up the servitude contract and grants her freedom. Overwhelmed, Till confesses she has no clear direction but is determined to find her purpose. When she does, she promises to return and share her journey with him. Before leaving, she hesitates and asks if she may visit him again. Xenos smirks, assuring her that she will always be welcome, so long as she has something to offer in exchange, of course. Upon returning home, Xenos was greeted by Lily, who informed him that the meal wasn't ready. Just then, the trio of dinner thieves arrived, bringing the necessary ingredients. Carmela appeared momentarily, teasing Xenos by remarking how it seemed as if he'd met a new girl before vanishing just as quickly. Lily, thrilled by the bounty of ingredients, eagerly began planning their meal while Xenos eagerly awaited the feast. Lily, determined to make the occasion special, promised to brew black tea for everyone to enjoy together. Xenos recalls his days as a member of the esteemed adventurer group, Golden Phoenix, once hailed among the most powerful parties in the kingdom. One day, their leader, Eston, informs him coldly that a slum-born commoner like him no longer belongs in their ranks. Eston tosses him a single gold coin as severance, while On sneers, calling Xenos useless and claiming the party is better off without him. Baffled, Xenos reminds them of his invaluable contributions as a healer, supporting them since their formation, but Eston scoffs, dismissing him as a self-taught fool lacking an official license, thus in their eyes utterly worthless. Stunned, Xenos asks if their bond had meant nothing. The group laughs in unison, mocking his belief. To them, he was nothing more than a disposable shield. On adds that now that they're the kingdom's top party, practically celebrities, they can't afford to associate with someone from the slums. He insists the gold coin should be more than sufficient for someone of Xenos' background, and warns him to stay silent about ever being one of them. Xenos realizes the coin is nothing but hush money. Without a word, he walks away, heart heavy, uncertain of his next path yet determined to carve one anew. As Xenos wandered aimlessly, a sudden commotion caught his ear. Curious, he approached the source and discovered a man and woman attempting to restrain an elf slave, planning to sell her to a repulsive noble. The elf fiercely resisted, managing to break free. In retaliation, the man fired an arrow into her leg. As she collapsed, he seized her by the collar, but the defiant elf bit down on his hand, enraging him further. Enraged, he drew a dagger and plunged it into her stomach. The woman, irritated, chastised him for damaging their merchandise. As they bickered over the bleeding girl sprawled in a pool of blood, Xenos stepped forward. Without hesitation, he offered the gold coin in exchange for the elf. The woman, seeing her as already lost, accepted instantly. The pair vanished into the shadows, leaving Xenos with the wounded girl. Kneeling beside her, he swiftly assessed the injury. The elf, barely conscious, assumed she was moments from death. But Xenos, a masterful healer, mended the wound effortlessly, restoring her to full health. Startled by the pain-free recovery, the girl thanked him with wide eyes and introduced herself as Lily. Realizing the coin had been spent for her, she grew anxious. Sensing her worry, Xenos reassured her that the coin meant nothing to him. In truth, he had no desire to cling to Eston's condescending token. Lily, curious and impressed, asks if Xenos is a renowned healer. He humbly replies that he's a nobody, without even a healing license. When he inquires where she lives, Lily simply says she's starving and homeless. Without hesitation, Xenos takes her to a modest tavern, buys her warm food and provides her with clean clothes. As Lily devours the meal, she asks why Xenos isn't eating. He smiles and claims he's not hungry. Though the truth is, he no longer has a single coin to spare. Just as he ponders how to earn money, a wounded lizard man stumbles into the tavern requesting water. Blood drips from his arm, clearly a bullet wound. Xenos approaches calmly, inspects the injury and assures him it's merely a scratch. Before the lizard man can respond, Xenos raises his hand and chants a healing spell, instantly closing the wound. Amazed and grateful, the lizard man hands Xenos some money before leaving. Xenos blinks, stunned. It's the first time anyone has paid him for healing. Lily remarks that it's quite normal. Healers typically charge for their services. Inspired, Xenos decides to embrace this new path. From that moment on, he resolves to open a clinic and begin a life of healing on his own terms. One obstacle stands in Xenos' path. His origins in the slums make acquiring a healer's license nearly impossible. Operating legally isn't an option. He'll have to work in the shadows as an unlicensed healer. Surprisingly, Lily is delighted by the idea. She vows to support him for the rest of her life. Xenos hesitates. He doesn't want to involve a young girl in illegal work. But unable to abandon her, he agrees to let her stay. He leads her to a forsaken district on the town's outskirts where ruined buildings and empty streets stretch as far as the eye can see. Lily, unsettled, asks why they're in such a desolate place. Xenos explains they must remain hidden, far from the town center, to avoid unwanted attention. He's searching for a house, anything livable to serve as their base. Eventually, he finds a structure that's worn down but still standing. Though far from ideal, Xenos is content. After all, he spent most of his past life sleeping under the open sky. Lily casts light magic to illuminate the space as Xenos inspects the house. Just as things start to feel settled, they're confronted by a ghostly figure, none other than Carmilla herself. Lily hides behind Xenos, certain this is the end. After all, wraiths are the deadliest of the undead, known for their fatal touch. Carmilla, the queen of wraiths, grins at the sight of fresh prey entering her domain and launches an attack. But Xenos calmly raises his hand and casts healing magic, instantly erasing her arms. Stunned, Carmilla stares in disbelief, while Lily gasps, "How are you fighting a wraith?" Xenos looks genuinely puzzled. "What's so special? I've fought hundreds." It's revealed that whenever On sought entertainment, he'd throw Xenos into the deepest dungeons, forcing him to confront wraiths. Over time, Xenos discovered they were highly vulnerable to his healing magic. Returning to the present, Xenos politely apologizes to Carmilla, explaining he simply wants to stay and won't cause trouble. Enraged, she strikes again, but he easily repels her. Furious that a mere human would defy her, Carmilla raises her hand and summons a small legion of wraiths. Unfazed, Xenos casts High Heal, instantly purging the lesser undead and leaving her alone once more. He apologizes again for the intrusion and humbly asks if she'd allow him just one room, to open a small clinic. Realizing this human is no ordinary intruder, Carmilla reluctantly agrees to share the space, though she declares the second floor her private domain before vanishing. Days pass and the once abandoned room begins to resemble a functioning clinic. As final touches are made, Lily suggests advertising, but Xenos calmly replies that there's no need. Right then, the door swings open. Zon the lizard man steps in once more, this time accompanied by his sister. She steps forward and asks if Xenos can treat her wounded arm. Xenos examines the injury and quickly deduces it was caused by a magic-infused poison bullet. The infection has spread too far. The arm's already dead, he says. It must be amputated. She calmly asks for the cost. Xenos responds flatly, 100,000. Zon erupts in outrage. It's far beyond standard for an amputation. But his sister silences him with a look, then turns to Xenos. "You know who I am, don't you?" Unfazed, he replies, "No, but I've heard the name Zofia." Indeed, Zofia is infamous in the slums, a lizard clan leader known for stealing from the rich and aiding the poor. She presses him. "Then justify that price." Xenos, without blinking, replies, "Because growing a new arm takes immense energy." Stunned, she demands, "What do you mean, growing a new arm?" Xenos blinks, confused by her confusion. "I'll cut it off and regenerate a new one." Zofia stares, speechless, then nods. "If you can do that, I'll pay." Moments later, she lies on the table. Xenos conjures an ethereal scalpel, severs the dead limb, and seamlessly regenerates a brand new arm. Xenos is taken aback when he learns that healers typically don't handle such cases. Zofia, grateful for his help, promises to send more people his way for treatment. Days pass. One evening, after attending to patients, Xenos sits down for tea with Carmilla and Lily. Lily asks, "Why do the lizard folk always come to us injured?" Xenos replies, "The underground slums are home to 3 factions at constant war. The lizard folk, the orcs, and the furries." Just then, the door opens and a group of furries enters, led by a demi-human woman. She introduces herself as Linga, the leader of the furries. Xenos recognizes her as a tyrant who controls all gambling operations in the area. He informs her that they're closed for the day but offers to help if it's an emergency. Linga chuckles. "No matter how many times we beat the lizard folk, they always return healed. Turns out you're the one healing them." With a scowl, she grabs a large axe and approaches, threatening to kill him to stop his aid to the lizard folk. She charges, but Xenos' shield shatters her weapon effortlessly. Undeterred, the furries swarm him, but their attacks have no effect. Frustrated, they begin destroying his clinic. Xenos tries to intervene, but they ignore him. Suddenly, Carmilla appears, furious at the havoc in her domain. The furries freeze in terror as they face Carmilla, a wraith radiating fury. Before she can strike, Xenos intervenes, asserting that this clinic is for saving lives, not ending them. Reluctantly, Carmilla retreats, her anger simmering as she ascends. Linga, trembling, immediately collapses, begging for mercy. "A man who can control a wraith can wipe us all out," she pleads. Xenos, unfazed, reassures her and the others, dismissing their fears. Realizing he's likely gained a new stream of clientele for his clinic, he moves on. Xeno's underground clinic had been thriving for some time, drawing a steady stream of patients from both the Lizardkin and the Beastkin factions. Now an orc visitor arrived with urgent news. Their chieftain, the esteemed Lady Lo, had fallen gravely ill. He requested Xeno's aid. Xenos instructed him to bring her to the clinic, but the orc refused. Lady Lo was too weak to move, and the constant presence of Lizardkin and Beastkin bearing gifts and constructing offerings made it far too risky for her to venture into enemy territory. With a weary sigh, Xenos agreed to accompany him to the orc den. He navigated a series of dark, winding caverns before emerging into a cavernous chamber where Lady Lo sat regally atop a throne surrounded by her kin. A striking figure of power and grace. Before Xenos could speak, she addressed him. She already knew who he was. Tales of the enigmatic healer had spread rapidly through both factions, praising his quiet strength and skill. Xenos winced at the notoriety. Too much attention could lead to complications with the authorities, especially since his clinic was unlicensed. He asked for her symptoms, but Lo simply smirked and challenged him to diagnose her without any hints. Xenos approached Lady Lo with calm precision. Scanning her body for visible injuries, finding none, he proceeded with an internal examination and quickly detected a lump in her abdomen. It wasn't a child but a monon, a volatile explosive stone. He questioned her about it, to which she confessed rather casually that she had accidentally swallowed it while eating rice balls. Xenos, skeptical, asked if it was an assassination attempt, but she dismissed the idea. It was simply a mishap. He turned to leave, advising her to remain still and let time pass, but she abruptly stopped him, admitting she'd bitten into the stone by accident, making it highly unstable. Even the slightest movement could trigger an explosion. The surrounding orcs immediately closed in, vowing to perish with her rather than abandon their leader. Xenos remained unmoved by their theatrics and was prepared to leave, until Lo made an unexpected offer. She declared she had a hidden trove of treasure stored in one of the chests and wanted him to have it. Xenos, initially thinking it a joke, caught the golden key she tossed him. Perplexed, he asked why she'd make such an offer. Lo replied simply, she'd heard that Xenos always demanded fair compensation, but never accepted a single coin from children. Lo admired Xenos' integrity and urged him to continue his noble work. With a resigned sigh, Xenos turned back to her, unsheathed his enchanted scalpel, and made a swift incision across her abdomen. The orcs gasped in horror and moved to attack, but before they could close in, he extracted the monostone and instantly healed the wound. Lo, stunned by the seamless recovery, warned him to dispose of the stone before it detonated. But Xenos didn't flinch. Calmly, he clenched the volatile core in his fists. It exploded violently. As the dust cleared, Lo stood speechless. Xenos remained untouched, casually brushing off debris. Without a word, he tossed the golden key back to her and turned to leave. She stopped him, asking why he bothered saving her when he could have kept the treasure for himself. Xenos replied that he only takes what's fair, and what she offered far exceeded the price of a simple procedure. From that day on, the leaders of all three factions began visiting him frequently, often without any real medical need. Xenos dismissed their behavior as boredom, but Lily suspected otherwise, a theory confirmed by Carmela, who revealed that the trio of faction leaders had fallen hopelessly in love with him, and a war for his affection might soon erupt. Xenos dismissed the rumors, insisting he was merely an unremarkable healer. But Carmela's words soon proved prophetic. One day, all three faction leaders arrived, individually, bearing lavish gifts and gourmet offerings, each declaring their intent to wage war the following morning. At dawn, the battlefield buzzed with anticipation. Members of the Lizardkin, Beastkin, and Orc clans stood side by side, exchanging casual banter while preparing for a war meant to crown the true sovereign of the underworld. Before the first blow was struck, Xenos and Lily arrived at the stadium, but instead of stopping the carnage, the underground doctor calmly encouraged them to settle things once and for all. With that, Zofia lunged first, daggers drawn, aiming for Linga. The nimble Beastkin evaded her strike with ease. Not wanting to be left out, the Orc chieftain hurled herself into the fray, only for Zofia to sidestep with practiced grace. Chaos erupted. Soldiers from all three factions clashed in brutal combat, while the faction leaders exchanged lethal blows with deadly intent. Lily looked on, visibly disturbed. Yet something strange soon became apparent. Despite the relentless violence, no one was dying. Injuries healed as quickly as they were inflicted. Eventually, the leaders paused, breathless and confused, realizing Xenos had been healing every combatant continuously throughout the entire battle. He merely shrugged. "Fight as long as you want," he said coolly. "But you're still my patients, and I always treat my patients." At that moment, the faction leaders broke into laughter, finally grasping how absurd the situation had become. Realizing the futility of their rivalry, they agreed to a truce, choosing to govern the underworld together in harmony. Lily beamed with joy, while Xenos, ever pragmatic, remarked that healing an entire battlefield wasn't easy, and he would be charging them generously for it. Days later, Zofia and her brother returned to the clinic for treatment. Linga and Lo were already there, lounging comfortably. Curious, Xenos asked how Zofia had injured herself this time. She explained with a grin that she was a thief targeting wealthy nobles, redistributing their riches to the impoverished slums. During her latest heist she clashed with the royal guard and sustained injuries. Her brother, however, had a different tale. He'd been ambushed in the open by a deranged woman known as the Iron Rose who attacked him relentlessly. Like an American with a minigun, he joked. Carmela chuckled and warned Xenos that this Iron Rose might soon visit him. After all, uniting the three feuding factions for the first time in years had surely caught the nobles' attention. Xenos sighed, uninterested in political drama, and sat down to enjoy the meal Lily had prepared. But Carmela was right. The Iron Rose had already entered the slums, only to be stunned by the sight of peace, Beastkin playing cards with lizard folk and orcs laughing side by side with their former enemies. She spots a lizardkin calmly sipping ale on a quiet corner street. Approaching, she remarks that it's been a while since she last set foot in the slums, and everything seems different. The lizardkin eyes her and replies, "Now that we've come to understand one another, we've realized we're not so different. There's no point in fighting anymore." Intrigued, she asks who the mediator was that halted the war. He shrugs. "The one who ended it prefers to stay in the shadows. I won't say a word." Her expression hardens. Without warning, she seizes his collar and presses a gun to his abdomen, threatening to shoot. Despite the danger, he refuses to reveal Zeno's name and manages to cry out for help. Fortunately, Zofia and her brother are nearby. Their sudden appearance forces the woman to retreat. As she flees, she notices Zofia's hands fully healed and narrows her eyes. Wandering through the slums, she stumbles upon Zeno's clinic late at night. Pushing the door open, she calmly asks him for directions out of the city. But the moment he moves to assist, she fires a smoke grenade at him. Lily, frozen in shock, watches the scene unfold, unsure what will happen next. Lily is stunned when Krishna abruptly shoots Xenos in the head, but Krishna calmly claims she had valid justification. Besides her current assignment, she was also investigating a spate of recent kidnappings. Seeing an elf, Lely, with a human, Xenos, she hastily concluded he was the abductor and reacted without hesitation. Lely quickly clarifies that Xenos is like family to her. He practically adopted her, and she's with him by choice. Krishna begins to realize the flaw in her assumption. After all, a kidnapping victim wouldn't look nearly as cheerful as Lely does. Fortunately, Krishna used non-lethal rounds, so she believes Xenos is merely unconscious. But to her shock, he emerges completely unharmed. She offers a rare apology for acting rashly but is clearly intrigued by how he survived. Xenos shrugs it off, explaining he used simple defensive magic to block the shot. Krishna, however, isn't convinced. No ordinary spell should be capable of deflecting her bullets. From her extensive experience as vice commander of the Royal Knights, she recognizes that his barrier magic rivals that of a grand sorcerer. Upon hearing her title, both Xenos and Lely tense up. Her presence suggests potential danger. Yet instead of hostility, Krishna reveals she has a favor to ask Xenos, something important enough to seek him out in person. Xenos agrees to speak with Krishna but discreetly warns his clients to avoid visiting while she's present. Once seated, Krishna reveals she's on a covert mission and seeks his cooperation. Xenos initially declines, wishing to avoid entanglement, but Krishna reminds him that aiding the knights is a civic duty, and given her impulsive nature, he fears refusal might provoke another bullet. Reluctantly, he listens as Krishna outlines her assignment: to apprehend an unidentified man believed to be a mediator who brought peace to the warring factions. She lacks a name or clear description, only the knowledge that he must be captured immediately. Xenos nearly chokes on his tea upon realizing she's unknowingly targeting him. Regaining composure, he calmly inquires why this so-called peacemaker is now a suspect. Krishna explains that such influence cannot be left unchecked. The knights cannot tolerate an unregulated power capable of ending a war. She adds that when she attempted to interrogate a local, he refused to cooperate despite threats. Further proof in her eyes that the mediator must be a dangerous manipulator. Xenos suggests the mediator might simply be avoiding attention, not seeking conflict. If left alone, he'd likely remain harmless. Suspicious, Krishna asks if he knows the man personally, but Xenos claims he's merely speculating. Still, Krishna insists her orders come directly from her commander, and a figure with such political sway cannot be ignored. Lely intervenes, arguing that the mediator poses no threat and only seeks profit through honest means. However, her tone suggests personal familiarity. Krishna catches on to Lely's slip, prompting Lely to hastily backpedal, claiming she doesn't know the mediator. Though Krishna grows increasingly suspicious, she chooses not to press further. For now, as night falls, Xenos subtly suggests it's time for her to leave, hoping to end the tense exchange. As Xenos tries to usher Krishna out, she notices a bed tucked in the corner of the room. Suspicious, she questions why he would place a bed in the basement. Unwilling to admit he and Lely share it due to the wraith upstairs, Xenos simply claims it's a spare. Intrigued, Krishna asks if she can use it as a temporary base. She's struggled to find suitable lodging in the slums and offers to pay for the stay. Xenos, unable to decline without raising suspicion, reluctantly agrees. Carmela, observing the situation invisibly, finds the entire exchange amusing. Lely brews green tea for their unexpected guest, but Krishna, sensitive to heat, blows on it with care. Still uneasy about the new woman's presence, Lely, possessive and jealous, claims Xeno's lap, asking for a head pat as usual. Confused but compliant, he indulges her until Carmela whispers in his ear, invisible as always, revealing Lely's jealousy. Determined not to be outshone, Lely showers Xenos with extra affection, though Krishna remains unfazed, focused solely on cooling her tea. Eventually, Lely dozes off. Xenos gently tucks her in before returning to the main room to speak with Krishna. He explains how he rescued Lely from slave traders, criminals tied to a local trafficking network. That history also sheds light on Lely's earlier aggression. Unfortunately, he holds no intel on the syndicate's current operations. Changing topics, Krishna leans forward with a serious question. It's evident to her now. Xenos must be no ordinary mage but a master of defensive magic. Krishna inquires whether it's theoretically possible to regenerate an entire arm through rigorous training in healing magic. Before Xenos can reply, she answers herself, declaring it an impossibility. Such a feat, she asserts, could only be accomplished by a saint or a top-tier healer. Curious, Xenos asks why she's bringing this up. Krishna reveals she recently fought Zofia and distinctly remembers inflicting severe damage to her arm, yet upon seeing her the following day, the limb appeared completely healed. She suspects a powerful healer resides within the slums, one capable of full regeneration. If true, such an individual would undoubtedly hold significant sway among the faction leaders. Krishna intends to resume her investigation at first light to uncover the identity of this sinister healer. Xenos is puzzled by her assumption that the healer must be malevolent. She seems to carry deep disdain for the slums, so he probes further. Krishna confesses her prejudice stems from personal tragedy. Her mother, a compassionate woman devoted to aiding the impoverished, was murdered there. She often organized food drives and helped feed the destitute, but one day she never returned. Witnesses said she was killed for her wedding ring. Despite all the lives her mother saved, no one was there to protect her when it mattered. That day shaped Krishna's resolve to join the Magus Order and become an unshakable force of justice, determined to eradicate the criminals lurking in the slums. The following day, Krishna resumes her investigation, allowing Xenos to return to treating patients. Zofia enters with a minor arm injury, requesting his aid. As he heals her, Xenos advises caution. Krishna's visits are unpredictable. Right on cue, Krishna reappears, having lost her way. The moment she spots Zofia, she draws her pistols. Instinctively, Zofia unsheathes her blades. A tense standoff ensues. Krishna demands to know whether a rogue healer is rallying criminals to threaten civilians. Zofia admits there's a healer but firmly denies any malice. She concedes she's no model citizen, being a thief herself, but insists that the nobility harbors far darker secrets. She points out that while Krishna is probing a trafficking ring, her own investigation revealed something damning. The mastermind isn't from the slums, but an aristocrat. Krishna is skeptical, given the slum-centered activity, but Zofia claims it's a calculated diversion meant to mislead the knights and shield the real culprit. Krishna remains wary but demands Zofia to reveal the mastermind behind the abductions. Zofia discloses a name, Kalindor. Krishna is incredulous. Kalindor is a known philanthropist revered for his dedication to educating orphans. The idea that he traffics children is unthinkable. Zofia expected Krishna's disbelief. To her, everyone from the slums is deemed a criminal. But the mediator never shared that view. He treats all equally, always offering redemption, unlike Krishna, who clings to her naive ideals of justice. Enraged by the insult, Krishna raises her weapon, but Xenos steps in, shielding Zofia. He urges Krishna to lower the gun. She demands he move aside, but he refuses. Zofia is his patient, and he won't let her be harmed. He confesses he is the mediator Krishna has been searching for. Krishna suspects deception. How could Xenos, a known master of defensive magic, also excel at healing? That would make him a dual specialist, an anomaly. Xenos humbly admits he wouldn't call himself a master, but he is adept in both disciplines. Healing and defense, after all, both stem from amplifying the body's natural processes. Krishna senses something suspicious and peers over the wall. There, hidden in plain sight, is a secret tunnel. She descends and, to her horror, discovers Sophia was right. Kalindor is behind the kidnappings. Before she can act, Kalindor appears from behind, using the gun she left upstairs to blast her arm clean off. He mocks her, amused at how easily he dispatched a knight. Now, all that's left is to finish her and continue his trafficking operation. But just as he raises the weapon, Zafia and Xenos arrive. Xenos had sensed danger and asked Zafia to lead him here. Kalindor, unwilling to leave witnesses, switches Krishna's gun to lethal mode and fires directly at Zeno's face. To Kalindor's shock, Zeno survives, injured but very much alive. In a panic, Kalindor drops the weapon while attempting to flee. Zenos picks it up. Kalindor begs for mercy. Fortunately for him, Zenos lives by a no-kill code, but he makes no promises about pain. He sets the gun to non-lethal and fires a shot into Kalindor's head. Zenos rushes to Krishna, who believes her time is up, her arm gone, her abdomen critically wounded. But Zenos reassures her with a smirk. She'll live, though the bill will be steep. Moments later, her wounds are miraculously healed. Awestruck, she begins to believe his claim of being a mediator. No longer seeing him as a threat, she views Zenos as a genuine hero. But he disagrees. He simply prevented death. To him, Krishna is the true hero for risking everything to save the children, even if her methods were flawed. Her heart was in the right place. With help from Zaphia and the lizard men, they evacuate the children. The royal knights are on their way, and Zenos has no desire to deal with the bureaucracy. As he prepares to leave, Krishna catches up to him, asking why he saved her, even though she had considered him an enemy. Zenos turns with a wry grin and replies, "Because you still owe me. For the clinic stay and the healing, full payment due by week's end." With Krishna no longer a threat, Zenos and Lely finally settle into a peaceful routine. But Zenos' current stability belies a grim past. As a child, he was a penniless orphan surviving in the slums, with no prospects and no hope. Just long days spent in alleyways, staring at nothing. One day, Aston wandered into the slums searching for a child to abduct, someone disposable to use as a living shield. Disappointed by the frail and unpromising lot, he suddenly noticed Zenos. Intrigued, he approached and began speaking in a courteous tone, masking his true intent with false warmth. "You're poor, starving, and without purpose," he said. "Why not come with me on an adventure?" Zenos, naive and desperate, mistook Ashton's fake kindness for sincerity, yet he hesitated. He knew slum dwellers were rarely granted the opportunity to become adventurers. Aston reassured him, claiming that skill mattered more than status. He then asked if Zenos possessed any useful abilities. Zenos timidly mentioned he knew a bit of healing magic. Aston, of course, didn't believe him. Healing magic required years of rigorous study at the Royal Academy. There was no way an unschooled orphan could master it alone. Still, Aston didn't care. Whether the boy could heal or not, he intended to use him as bait if danger arose. Once Zenos agreed, Aston led him into the forest. There they confronted a wolf-like monster. During the battle, Aston sustained a minor wound, and it was then that Zenos, against all expectations, cast his healing magic. To finish the fight, Aston lunges at the wolf. In response, Zenos quietly casts his healing magic once more, this time enhancing Aston's speed. The effect is immediate. With a single fluid strike, Aston decapitates the beast, yet he remains oblivious. He neither notices that his wounds vanished mid-battle nor that his speed had been mysteriously amplified. In his eyes, Zenos is still utterly useless. Years pass under this delusion. Eventually, Aston expels Zenos from the party. We already know what path Zenos took afterward, but Ashton's group hasn't fared nearly as well. After Zenos' departure, the Golden Phoenix Party takes on a critical mission within a cave, one meant to win favor with the kingdom's elite nobles. None of them, however, are thrilled about the effort involved. Yuma groans, urging everyone to finish quickly so they can return to the inn and resume drinking. Andres is more enthusiastic, knowing their noble status and party name attract admirers, especially women. Whenever they mention they belong to the famed Golden Phoenix, a group renowned for completing quests and slaying magical beasts without ever taking damage. But that flawless record is about to be tested. Suddenly, the monsters they came to hunt appear. Aston draws his blade and signals Guile to cast protective magic on him. Guile complies, enveloping him in a defensive spell. Still, as Aston engages the wolves, a fiery strike manages to sear his arm. Meanwhile, Yuma is being mauled by a wolf at the rear, rendering him completely useless. Aston, desperate, shouts at Andres to unleash attack magic, but the spell takes an eternity to cast. Mid-incantation, he's struck by a fireball and collapses. Aston stares in disbelief, questioning whether his team had always been this incompetent. Realizing victory is impossible, he immediately orders a retreat. Once outside, he demands an explanation. How could B-rank beasts push them to the brink? Andres counters, pointing out that Aston didn't fare much better. Guile then hesitantly asks if it's possible Zenos had truly been healing them all along. Aston dismisses the idea outright. There's no way a slum-born peasant like Zenos could have wielded genuine healing magic. Still, the doubt lingers. Just in case, Aston decides it might be wise to recruit a healer. A few days later, they return to the cave with a new addition. Ma, a professional healer from the capital. She immediately warns them battlefield healing isn't her strength. She typically works within the city but agreed to join them because she holds an adventurer's license. Curious, she asks why a party as renowned as Golden Phoenix, famed for clearing missions unscathed, would need her assistance at all. Aston, unwilling to explain the embarrassing truth, curtly tells her to mind her own business. Guile nervously asks Ma if Yuma will recover, given the brutal mauling he suffered. Ma, who examined him after Elmo's treatment, confirms he'll survive, but the damage is permanent. He'll never return to adventuring. One might expect Aston to show some empathy. Instead, he shrugs it off, declaring Yuma wasn't worth keeping anyway. As for why this mission matters, Lord Fennel requested a scarf made from a fire fox's pelt as a gift for his daughter. To earn the noble's favor, Aston is more than willing to gamble his life for that scarf. But barely moments into the plan, chaos erupts. The wolves ambush them. Aston quickly retaliates, ordering Guile to cast protective magic over the group. He charges forward, but every strike misses its mark. The wolves respond with a barrage of fireballs. Aston deflects 3, but the 4th slams into Andres' stomach, incapacitating him instantly. Aston keeps pressing the attack, failing to land a single blow. Ma finally yells for a retreat, warning that Andres' condition is critical. Back outside, furious and shaken, Aston rounds on Guile and demands to know why he didn't shield Andres. Ma calmly informs Aston that Guile's defensive spell did work. Without it, Andres would have died instantly. Aston impatiently urges her to heal him, but Ma shakes her head. Only high healers or saints can mend injuries of this severity without prior preparation. If Andres isn't taken to a proper facility soon, he won't survive. Later, Aston meets with Lord Fennel's attendant, who coldly conveys the noble's deep disappointment. Aston begs for another chance, confident he can still acquire the fire fox pelt. But it's too late. The Lord's daughter's birthday has already passed. Worse, Fennel's anger isn't about the failure itself. It's because Aston kept making empty promises. Had he been honest about the mission's risks or called it off, Fennel would have understood and chosen another gift. Instead, Aston tried to cover his inadequacy. For a fleeting moment, he considers blaming Xenos. But then he remembers Xenos was never officially registered as part of Golden Phoenix. From a legal standpoint, he doesn't exist in their records, so no scapegoat. Left with no choice, Aston bows in shame, loathing the act of lowering himself before a mere servant. He vows to make amends, but the attendant simply asks, "With half your team barely clinging to life, how exactly do you plan to do that?" Aston assures the attendant that he plans to recruit new members to replace the fallen, and the next time Lord Fennel offers a commission, Golden Phoenix will deliver. With that, the servant leaves. Guile, however, questions the wisdom of making bold promises. They have no leads, no recruits, and certainly can't complete missions with just the 2 of them. But Aston brushes off the concern. He claims to have a plan. Though he still considers Xenos inferior, Aston can't deny the party functioned far better when Xenos was with them. He's convinced Xenos, desperate for recognition, will gladly return despite the past mistreatment. The next day, Aston and Guile descend into the slums in search of Xenos, though they haven't the faintest clue where to begin. Then Aston gets an idea. He'll enlist the help of the 3 local faction leaders, reasoning that gutter dwellers like them will do anything for coin. Soon after, a lizard man escorts him to Zafia. Aston says he wants to hire her for a job. Zafia, mildly annoyed since this interrupts her routine clinic visits, nonetheless agrees to listen. After all, a paying client is still a client. Aston introduces himself as the leader of Golden Phoenix and informs Zofia he's searching for a man named Xenos who arrived in the slums roughly 2 months ago. Zofia is momentarily speechless. Xenos had already told her how Aston disgracefully expelled him from the party. That decision alone was idiotic, but the fact that Aston now dares to come looking for him is beyond comprehension. Disgusted, she orders Aston to get lost, saying Xenos has far more important things to do than entertain the likes of him. Her contempt visibly stings, and for a brief second Aston considers attacking her. Until reality sinks in, she'd annihilate him. Aston turns to Linga's faction for assistance. But the moment Linga realizes who he is, she tells him to scram. Aston is stunned to learn she too is close to Xenos, and if he's thinking of making trouble, Linga reminds him, coldly, that she could kill him thrice over before he even blinks. Desperate, Aston approaches Lou next, but she's no different. She tells him to go to hell and warns him. If she hears he's been harassing Xenos, she'll crush his skull between her thighs without hesitation. Aston and Guile beat a hasty retreat from Lou's domain. Aston is in disbelief. All 3 faction leaders are willing to defend Xenos. He tries to rationalize it, insisting they must be mistaking someone else for the Xenos he knew, because his Xenos couldn't possibly wield this kind of respect. While discussing Xenos, Guile suddenly spots him strolling down the street with Lely. Having just wrapped up their shopping, the 2 are heading home when Aston calls out. Xenos freezes in disbelief at the sight of Aston and Guile, but quickly turns away, clearly uninterested in revisiting the past. Aston calls after him, loudly declaring he came to personally welcome Xenos back to Golden Phoenix. Before the words finish leaving his mouth, Xenos flatly refuses. Aston is stunned. He'd been certain Xenos would leap at the chance to rejoin. But Xenos calmly recounts the previous mistreatment, pitiful compensation, constant disrespect, and no reason whatsoever to return. Still, if Aston is truly desperate, Xenos offers a compromise. He might tag along for a few quests if his schedule permits, but he lays down new terms. 50,000 for basic healing, $1 million for critical care and additional fees for defensive magic and buffs. If Aston won't pay, then there's nothing more to discuss. As Xenos turns to leave again, Aston, infuriated by the rejection, draws his sword in rage. Before he can strike, however, a powerful blast knocks him back. Krishna steps forward unimpressed. She warns Aston that assaulting someone in front of a royal knight is monumentally foolish. She had come merely to see Xenos, but now, thanks to Aston's attempted attack, she'll be placing him under arrest. Aston flees, unwilling to face imprisonment. After the chaos, Xenos and Lely return home to unwind. Not long after, Zofia, Linga, and Lou arrive to inform Xenos that Aston had tried to recruit them to track him down. Though all three refused, Zofia remains uneasy, fearing Aston may persist. She warns that if Aston turns to the illegal underground guild, he might hire an assassin out of spite. Granted, such services demand a hefty price, and considering Aston came searching for Xenos instead of recruiting new members, he's likely broke. Still, Zofia mentions troubling rumors. A figure known only as the Guide, said to accept jobs free of charge under certain conditions. If Aston manages to sway him, Xenos could be in danger. Later that night, Xenos lies awake, unsettled by the encounter. Camilla joins him, concerned. She asks if it's true he learned healing magic while in the slums. Xenos explains that his power first manifested when attempting to revive a corpse. Healing magic simply flowed naturally afterward. Camilla reminds him that resurrection spells are forbidden, though she acknowledges he was unaware at the time. The conversation turns to ancient taboo magic. Camilla recalls tales from her past of the Demon Lord's wars, fought using golems animated through forbidden sorcery. Suddenly a disturbance erupts outside. Camilla volunteers to investigate. To her horror, she finds a massive portion of the slums engulfed in flames as a rampaging golem tears through the streets. As the colossal golem rampages through the slums, it leaves a trail of destruction, forcing panicked residents to flee for their lives. Xenos arrives to inspect the chaos firsthand, accompanied by Carmela. She notes the strangeness of an ancient weapon like this appearing in such a place, questioning how it ended up in the slums. Just then, the three gang leaders arrive, and Xenos is relieved to see them unharmed. They assure him that while they remain unscathed, many of their subordinates were severely injured in the monster's initial onslaught. When they ask about the golem, Xenos explains that it is an artificial life form, crafted through long-forgotten magic technology thought to have vanished centuries ago. IV, one of the leaders, mentions that her orc scouts reported the golem emerging from the depths of the slums, prompting Xenos to suspect the involvement of the underground guild. Prioritizing the injured, he instructs the trio to gather the wounded in one location, vowing that those responsible will face retribution. Meanwhile, the shadowy figure responsible for the attack watches from a distance. The assassin, Guy, had accepted the task after Eston approached him seeking revenge. Amused by Eston's mere desire for petty vengeance against Xenos and those around him, Guy took the job for a meager sum, finding the opportunity to indulge his twisted nature far more enticing than the payment itself. Guy presents On with a prototype golem core, claiming it has the power to utterly defeat Xenos. As he observes the golem rampaging through the slums, Guy finds its destructive force impressive, though its speed leaves him dissatisfied. He muses over how Xenos will react as those close to him fall one by one. However, Xenos has no intention of letting that happen. As the three demi-human gangs swiftly gather the wounded in one location, Xenos unleashes a potent ranged healing spell, rapidly restoring their strength. Though still irritated at the prospect of treating hundreds without compensation, he presses on, quietly worrying about Lily, who remains at home. Guy, monitoring the scene from his vantage point, acknowledges Xenos' impressive healing abilities, but remains unfazed, knowing that mere recovery won't solve the core issue as long as the golem remains active. Once Xenos finishes treating the injured, he turns his gaze to the still rampaging golem, wondering if it might eventually tire and retreat. Carmela quickly dismisses this hope, explaining that golems never cease until their commands are fulfilled. She adds that constructing a golem in this era should be nearly impossible, as the high-purity magic stones required for a core are found only on the distant southernmost continent, once the domain of demon lords. These stones should have long since been depleted, and the dark arts needed to craft such a creature have largely faded into legend, leaving Xenos to ponder who could still possess such rare resources. Xenos dismisses Carmela's concerns, insisting they must first neutralize the golem before worrying about its origins. Carmela cautions that it will be dangerous, but the girls refuse to stand by while their home is torn apart. When Xenos asks how to disable the creature, Carmela explains that its core must be destroyed as it continually regenerates otherwise. However, Xenos hesitates, reluctant to shatter the core since he could potentially sell it later. Undeterred, he leads the group toward the golem, casting powerful buffs to amplify their speed and strength. The girls, their abilities heightened, strike the golem with newfound force, shattering its leg in a single decisive blow and toppling it to the ground. Yet the golem's self-repair is swift, and it counters by launching Linga into the air. Xenos quickly steps in, healing her injuries in real time, making the impact feel like a mere breeze. Though rusty from months without combat, Xenos finds his rhythm, expertly switching between offensive, defensive, and restorative spells while maintaining a critical distance to maximize his magic's effectiveness. The girls, now synchronized with his support, focus their attacks on the golem's limbs, exploiting the delay in its regeneration. Following Xeno's command, they shatter both its legs, sending the golem crashing to the ground. However, just as the golem collapses, Xeno spots a lone girl trapped within its imminent path. His heart races as he realizes he can't get a clear line of sight to cast a protective spell. Desperate, he dashes forward, hoping to shield her in time, only to witness the golem itself twist to avoid crushing the child, a startling act of unexpected restraint. Xenos hesitates, puzzled by the golem's sudden restraint, but quickly begins a detailed scan as the girl flees to safety. Moments later, Carmela arrives, noting the golem's odd behavior. Xenos explains that the creature isn't purely artificial. Its core, embedded in the left side of its chest, isn't just a magic stone but a living human. From a distant vantage point, Guy watches with a sly grin as Xenos unravels his twisted creation. Lacking high-quality magic stones, Guy resorted to a dark, forbidden method, fusing a human with an imperfect stone to form the golem's core. He chose On, a fool driven by rage and regret, calculating that his intense negative emotions would make him easier to manipulate. Guy had convinced the red-haired warrior that merging with the stone was essential for his revenge, exploiting his desperation to fuel the experiment. Now he eagerly awaits Xeno's next move, curious if he has the resolve to destroy a former comrade to save the slums. Realizing the grim reality, Xenos orders the girls to retreat, insisting this is a battle only he can finish. Carmela also withdraws, mindful of the approaching sunrise, leaving Xenos alone with the raging golem. As he stares at the hulking form, Xenos reflects on the irony. Despite On's greed and selfishness, born from a tragic past where he failed to save his sister due to poverty, some trace of humanity seems to linger within him. Xenos wonders if the sight of the terrified girl had stirred memories of his lost sibling, but he knows it's too late for redemption. With a grim resolve, Xenos conjures a blade of pure mana, dashing forward to sever the golem's massive arms with a single fluid strike. As the creature bellows in agony, he presses his attack, carving deep into its chest with a final devastating slash, exposing On's twisted, trapped form within the shattered core. Xenos declares to Eston that this is the end, and without hesitation, strikes him down. Guy, witnessing this, is taken aback by Xenos' ruthlessness, having not expected such mercilessness. Yet he understands that Xenos may be seeking retribution for past mistreatment. Disheartened, Guy contemplates leaving but then notices something unexpected. Xenos is not merely cutting down Eston, he is simultaneously healing him. Xenos meticulously destroys the parts of Eston's body fused with the magic stone, instantly regenerating them into normal human tissue. The process is taxing, yet Xenos perseveres, displaying a remarkable blend of stamina and precision, despite having healed countless others earlier. Guy, astounded, struggles to comprehend the sheer extent of Xenos' abilities, prompting him to reconsider his own strategy. Meanwhile, Xenos tells Eston that although it would be better for the world if he perished here, he cannot allow it. Someone must bear responsibility for the destruction in the slums, and Xenos demands compensation for tirelessly healing the injured. Moreover, Eston once did him two significant favors, rescuing him from the streets and giving him a severance gold coin that ultimately freed Lily and transformed his life. Lastly, Xenos affirms that as a healer, he cannot let anyone die under his care. With unwavering resolve, Xenos delivers a decisive blow to the magic stone embedded in Eston's heart, shattering it completely. Freed from the stone's influence, Eston, now on his knees, admits that Xenos' extraordinary nature is so overwhelming it almost makes him nauseous. Recalling how Xenos defended the demi-human girls earlier, he now realizes that Xenos had been protecting their party as well. Eston collapses, pleading for Xenos' forgiveness, though he knows he doesn't deserve it. Xenos commands him to rise, but Eston refuses, declaring he won't stand until forgiven. Xenos, unamused, insists he hurry up because he needs to punch him in the face. Eston, stunned, watches as Xenos channels the last of his mana to amplify the punch's force tenfold. As Xenos steps back, he grins eerily, revealing that another reason he spared Eston's life was to deliver this very blow. With that, he strikes Eston with full force, sending him crashing. A few minutes later, Eston regains consciousness, only to find Krish standing beside him. He asks where Xenos is, and she informs him that she met him on the way. Xenos had shared all the details with her. She notes the miracle that no one was injured and warns Eston that he owes Xenos for the rest of his life. She proceeds to arrest him on numerous charges, adding public indecency to the list. Only then does Eston realize he's sitting there in his birthday suit. Krish delivers a message from Xenos. His sword has been taken to be sold for compensation. Eston is left with nothing, no sword, no clothes. However, Xenos leaves him a parting gift, a gold coin identical to the severance pay he had once received. Krish informs Eston that Xenos never wants to see him again. Hearing this, Eston breaks down in tears like a child. Meanwhile, Xenos trudges home, only to encounter the demi-human girls, who offer their support despite his insistence that he's fine. Upon reaching his home, Lily eagerly pours him a cup of tea, certain he'd return unharmed. Krishna has been tirelessly investigating the mastermind behind the Golem incident, but her efforts have yielded little. All she knows is that the culprit is someone known as the Guide, an elusive figure who leaves no trace. Despite her attempts to track him, the location where Asen met the Guide has already been meticulously cleared, leaving no evidence behind. Zofia also probed the underground guild and discovered that the Guide only recently surfaced, but beyond that his identity remains a mystery. Questioning locals would be futile, given his ghost-like presence. Krishna considers the Guide a dangerous figure but doubts he will reveal himself soon, given his ability to cover his tracks. However, Zofia suspects the Guide will reappear, arguing that someone of his caliber doesn't simply vanish without a grand scheme in mind. Krishna dismisses this as speculation, pointing out that without solid proof it's just conjecture. Zeus, sensing the rising tension, interrupts, asking why Krishna is seated so far from the others, making it difficult to converse. Krishna explains that while she appreciates Zofia's recent assistance, her status as a royal knight prevents her from mingling too freely with demi-humans. Xenos, realizing a heated exchange is imminent, wisely chooses to stay out of the brewing conflict. He swiftly ushers everyone outside, instructing them not to return unless injured. Xenos then sinks into his chair, attempting to unwind, when Lely approaches him nervously. She starts to suggest that given the immense mana he expended in the Golem battle, a trip to a hot spring might be refreshing. However, before she can finish, Zafia bursts in, eagerly proposing the same idea. Xenos, thinking a change of pace would be nice, agrees, and Zafia leaves with a satisfied smile. Moments later, Linga arrives, cautiously checking for others before asking if he would like to accompany her to the hot spring. Though Xenos still finds the idea appealing, he feels compelled to decline, given that Zafia already extended the invitation. Yet, before he can respond, Linga boldly declares she'll meet him at the hot spring and exits swiftly. Shortly after, Lo appears, and without even speaking, Xenos can already predict her intent. She, too, invites him to the hot spring, and when he remains silent she takes it as a yes, cheerfully announcing that she'll see him there. Not long after, Krishna repeats the pattern, leaving Xenos puzzled as to why everyone is suddenly so fixated on the hot spring. He then recalls that Lely had been on the verge of making a similar suggestion before being interrupted. However, Lely, flustered and embarrassed, remains silent, unwilling to admit her missed opportunity. Carmamela, having overheard the entire sequence, finds it amusing that Lely mustered the courage to speak up, only to be overshadowed by the others. Yet Xenos remains oblivious to her quiet laughter. Carmela, sensing the potential for more intriguing moments at the hot spring, decides to join as well, eager for the rare chance to unwind. A short while later, as Xenos relaxes in the steaming bath, Zafia unexpectedly enters. He quickly points out that this is the men's side, but Zafia dismisses his concern, explaining that she put up an out-of-order sign to ensure they wouldn't be disturbed. Though she had initially intended to be more forward, Zafia settles for casual conversation, remarking that others have noticed a change in her demeanor since meeting him. Xenos agrees, admitting that she's less aggressive than before, though he's more preoccupied with her proximity. Undeterred, Zafia inches closer, hoping to catch him off guard, but before she can press further, Linga storms in, accusing Zafia of trying to get a head start. She feigns dizziness, attempting to stumble into Xenos' arms, but Zafia quickly intercepts, sparking a playful struggle. Amid the commotion, Lu suddenly rises from the water, demanding to join the fray. Xenos, startled, questions why she's here and lacking a towel. Lu grins, revealing that she had been lurking underwater, waiting for the perfect moment to surprise him. As for her bold entrance, she admits she wanted to show off her well-toned form, boldly asking what he thinks. Xenos, unable to see much with the light behind Lu, still finds the entire situation unsettling. He silently endures, hoping the chaos will subside, but then Krishna arrives, scolding the others for their antics in the men's bath. The others quickly fire back, pointing out that Krishna has no right to judge, given that she clearly came for the same reason. She insists that's beside the point, sparking an even louder confrontation as all four begin bickering over Xenos. Frustrated, Xenos finally loses his patience and orders them to return to the women's bath. His outburst is so loud that it echoes across the hall, startling the other guests. One, overhearing the commotion, mutters about the audacity of those intruding on the men's side, hoping the ruckus won't spoil her vacation. When the girls eventually return to the women's bath, they are visibly deflated, disappointed by Xenos' rejection. However, they soon find themselves bonding over the shared experience, surprising an onlooker who never expected to see a human, werewolf, ogre, and lizardkin casually chatting like old friends. Later, as the bathhouse empties and the group gathers for a meal, Krishna remains hesitant, struggling to admit she genuinely enjoys their company. Afterward, Zenos tucks Lely into bed before stepping out onto the balcony, where Carmela waits. She teases him, asking if he's finally starting to have fun. Zenos admits the meal was enjoyable, though it quickly soured once the others began drinking and competing for his attention. Carmela, amused by his plight, simply chuckles, warning him to appreciate the light-hearted moments while they last. As she suspects his life is about to become far more complicated, Zenos tells her to stop tempting fate, but it's too late. Ray's intuition is rarely off the mark. He then recalls that Wraiths cannot endure prolonged sunlight, making him wonder how Carmela managed to join them. She casually explains that she simply possessed the staff over there and had Lely carry it, as Wraiths can only inhabit objects they were attached to in life. When Zenos tries to probe into her past, Carmela swiftly changes the topic, offering to pour him a drink instead. The following morning, a violent explosion rocks the kitchen, drawing Yuman to the scene. She finds one of the innkeepers collapsed, his arm severely burned after a fire magic stone in the stove detonated. As a healer, Yuman quickly stabilizes his condition but admits that her skills aren't sufficient to fully restore his arm. She urges that he be taken to the nearest royal hospital for proper treatment, though she fears his arm may never fully recover. Just then, Zenos arrives, and Yuman pleads for his help to transport the injured man. However, Zenos, with a calm yet dismissive glance, judges the wounds as minor and continues on his way, mentioning that he has a ride to catch. As a parting gesture, he casually heals the man without further comment, striding off with Lely at his side. Yuman, momentarily stunned, mentally labels him a heartless jerk, thinking he ignored the man's plight. However, when she glances down, she realizes the innkeeper's arm has been completely restored, leaving her bewildered by Zenos' silent act of mercy. She wonders if her healing magic caused it but knows she lacks the skill. Only saints or high-level healers can achieve such feats. She deduces Zenos must be an exceptional healer. She immediately reports this to her superior Ernardo, who is surprised by the existence of an elite healer wandering the country. The government would likely want him as a national asset, but tracking him seems impossible since all Yuman recalls is that Zenos had black hair. Ernardo isn't overly concerned. If Zenos healed a grievously injured man without charge, he must be honorable. So letting him act freely causes no harm. However, when Yuman mentions Zenos wore a black overcoat, Ernardo's interest piques, and he resolves it might be worthwhile to find him. Yuman asks how he plans to do so. Ernardo reasons that since no official records exist, Zenos is unlicensed and likely operates within the slums. Ernardo devises a plan to reach him. Later that day, Zan drags Ernardo into Zenos' office, pleading for help. Zan, unaware of who the man is, brought him in after he collapsed, coughing up copious blood and in dire condition. Zenos warns Zan that the man may be contagious and orders everyone to keep their distance until he completes his initial scan. From what Zenos observes, the man's lungs are severely damaged, resembling red lung disease. He instructs Lely to stay back. The red lung pandemic once claimed many lives and is highly infectious, yet it was thought eradicated after a cure emerged. Zenos is baffled how the man contracted it. Ernardo rises, impressed by Zenos' swift diagnosis, and introduces himself as a Royal Hospital elite healer, though he admits limited healing magic skills. At that moment, Yuman rushes in, reprimanding Ernardo for recklessly making himself ill just to meet Zenos. Ernardo insists he had no choice and admits the sickness is agonizing. He produces a vial and drinks it, explaining he ingested a drug to mimic red lung symptoms. Hoping locals would lead him to Zenos, he reassures Zenos the effects will fade, having taken the antidote. Zenos questions why Ernardo possesses such a drug. Ernardo reveals he created it during his development of the red lung cure years ago. Zenos, astonished, realizes Ernardo is the famed doctor behind the vaccine, earning elite healer status. Ernardo then explains his urgent desire to meet Zenos arose because the description of his coat reminded him of an old friend. He asks about the coat's origin. Zenos replies it belonged to his teacher, whose whereabouts are unknown. Ernardo then invites Zenos to join the Royal Hospital, citing a pressing matter where his expertise is needed. Just then, the women arrive, having heard a stranger was harassing Zenos, ready to intervene if necessary. Ernardo reassures them he intends no coercion, merely to offer a contract, which Zenos appears to accept. Sophie questions Zenos' certainty, but he deems it wise. Now that the Royal Hospital is aware of his covert clinic, gaining Ernardo's support is prudent. Moreover, during the red lung crisis, Ernardo selflessly distributed the cure to the slums at no cost, proving his integrity. Zenos trusts him implicitly. As part of the agreement, Zenos is escorted to the Royal Hospital by Ernardo and Yuman. He is astounded by the enormity of the facility. They eventually reach Ernardo's office, and once Zenos is settled, Ernardo outlines the job offer. A string of recent disappearances requires investigation, and he wishes to enlist Zenos for the task. Although Zenos agrees, he admits reconnaissance isn't his forte and questions Ernardo's choice in hiring him. Bernardo explains that as a member of the Royal Hospital, Xenos will gain access to exclusive programs, simplifying intelligence gathering. Xenos, however, is concerned that drawing attention might compromise his identity. Romero reassures him he has already crafted a background story. Xenos has been studying abroad and has just returned. Xenos doubts such a story would deceive the other healers, but Bernardo assures him that with an elite healer's endorsement no one will scrutinize it. Human then escorts Xenos to the hospital dormitory where he'll reside for the next few weeks. To his surprise, Lely awaits him there. When he inquires why, Human explains Bernardo approved the paperwork for her relocation. The dormitory policy permits healers to live with spouses or close kin. Lely teases that she must be Xenos' wife now, but in truth, Human designated her as his younger sister. Human proposed Lely's presence to help Xenos feel more at ease, knowing he'd worry about leaving her behind. Xenos is genuinely thankful for her thoughtfulness. After Human departs, Carmela arrives. He understands why Leal is here, but he has no clue why Carmela would travel all the way to the capital. Truthfully, she lacks a compelling reason. She simply enjoys tormenting Xenos as unusual events seem to follow him. Xenos asks if she's aware that with so many healers around, she risks exorcism if spotted. Carmela, however, remains unbothered, asserting that aside from Xenos, few here possess the strength to exorcise her. Later, Xenos sits in the cafeteria with Human, who inquires how he's adapting. He replies it's manageable, but he expects to be overwhelmed soon and still doesn't know how to obtain an official healing license. Human offers to guide him through it, explaining the steps. First, pass a healing aptitude test to gain entry to the Royal Healing Academy. Then, after grueling years of study, one may take the licensing exam. The process sounds daunting, and Xenos is astonished that anyone endures it. But that's only the beginning. Earning an adventurer license requires yet another exam for fieldwork. The same applies to military service, with further testing required to ascend in healer rank. Most within the institution are either researchers or pursuing academic advancement. The scope of it all overwhelms Xenos, so he shifts the conversation and asks Human about the missing persons. Human explains that one of the victims was named Alfred, an advanced healer and researcher. He was compassionate and gifted in medical arts. According to Bernardo, Alfred played a pivotal role in developing the red lung cure. Xenos thinks Alfred sounds like a decent person, making him worth searching for, though he still lacks details. He asks Human if there are any leads. At that moment, the cafeteria doors swing open and Goldrin enters. Xenos inquires about him, and Human explains he is the vice director of the Royal Hospital and a Class 7 advanced healer. Xenos, unfamiliar with the classification, listens as Human clarifies. Healers are divided into beginner, advanced, and elite ranks, each with 7 tiers. A level 7 advanced healer is the highest attainable before reaching elite status, making Goldrin highly influential. He's currently campaigning to become the next director, as the current one is largely absent due to age. Thus, Goldrin effectively holds the most power within the academy. Under his leadership, the hospital has changed drastically, though not for the better. Human notes that the wealthy receive top-tier treatment, while the poor are handed an ice pack and a get-well sticker. Goldrin, she adds, puts little effort into honing his skills, and it's rumored he bribed his way to level 7. Xenos quickly surmises the type of man he's dealing with, and would prefer to avoid him entirely. Unfortunately, that's unlikely. Human suspects Goldrin may be connected to Alfred's disappearance. Eager to rise through the ranks, Goldrin recruits as many prodigies as possible, and Alfred was one of them. Xenos asks if Goldrin has issued any statements regarding Alfred's disappearance, but Goldrin has denied all involvement. Xenos understands his objective, though he's uncertain how to approach someone as influential. Human reassures him, if Xenos showcases his exceptional healing in one of the programs, Goldrin is bound to take notice. Xenos acknowledges his own talent but has never gauged it against others, so he's unsure how he'll rank. Still, he agrees to try. At that moment, Human's associate Crescent approaches and asks why she's dining alone. She replies that she's free to sit wherever she likes. Crescent misreads the tone, thinking she's just being coy. He then notices Xenos and recognizes him as the prodigy recommended by an elite healer, sparking a hint of jealousy. He chooses to walk away, warning Xenos not to tarnish his sponsor's reputation. Xenos asks Human what that was about. She explains Crescent is her classmate, a decent person, but ever since being scouted by Goldrin his ego has inflated. Xenos recalls that in his youth he once practiced resurrection on a corpse he found in an alley, attempting to reanimate it. Before he could potentially create a zombie, his future mentor appeared and smacked him on the head, declaring it a waste to use magic on the dead. He told Xenos to use his gifts to heal the living instead. From that moment, Xenos' master took him in and began instructing him in the art of healing magic alongside another child, Veritra. Within a year, both had become remarkably proficient. However, their mentor cautioned them not to grow arrogant. Healing a few injuries merely qualifies one as a third-rate healer. In the present, Xenos attends his first class as a student. the subject being undead creatures. While the material is familiar from his adventuring days, Xenos is impressed by the pedagogy. It's well structured for those with no prior experience. When the professor invites questions, a student inquires about wraiths. Regrettably, the professor offers little beyond the fact that wraiths rank highest among the undead. First-hand accounts are scarce, and all adventuring parties that have encountered one were annihilated. The advised course of action: flee immediately. Moreover, wraiths capable of speech are to be strictly avoided as their intellect correlates with immense power. Xenos is taken aback. Currently, a sentient wraith resides at his home with Leal, and he hadn't realized Carmela was so formidable. He opts to withhold that information to avoid alarming anyone. The professor then asks if any students have encountered undead. Crescent is the first to respond, introducing himself and stating he spends several years adventuring and has vanquished approximately 30 ghosts. The class applauds Crescent's ghost count, and he revels in the attention. Until he notices Xenos isn't clapping, he pointedly asks how many ghosts Xenos has defeated. Though capable of handling around 50 at once, Xenos downplays his ability to avoid standing out and claims he can exorcise 30. Crescent accuses him of lying, but Xenos calmly affirms he can vanquish 30 simultaneously. The room falls silent as the students realize he meant in a single encounter. They prompt him for details, and Xenos recounts entering an underground labyrinth swarming with ghosts. He simply kept casting heal until none remained. The students quickly deduce he's referring to the Garments and Labyrinth, a location even gold-class adventurers approach with caution. Needless to say, everyone is stunned, though Crescent remains skeptical, unwilling to believe Xenos surpassed him. The next class covers magic circles. Determined to prove himself, Crescent sits beside Xenos to showcase his superiority. Xenos has never invested much in understanding magic circles, considering them inefficient, but he still attends. When the professor presents a magic circle and asks for a volunteer to replicate it on the board, Crescent eagerly steps forward and draws a flawless healing circle, earning the professor's praise. Then, Crescent smugly volunteers Xenos to draw one as well. Although Xenos hadn't intended to participate, he has no choice now. He recalls a single circle his master once taught him and decides to replicate it. Crescent mocks Xenos, laughing at his drawn magic circle for appearing nothing like those in the textbook. However, the professor halts in stunned awe upon examining it. Xenos' circle surpasses basic healing. It resembles a regeneration array but with a unique twist. Xenos confirms it's indeed a regeneration circle, albeit an unusual one. If a patient loses multiple fingers, it unpredictably regrows just one. It's an inefficient, mana-intensive spell that most can't activate, but Xenos casts it effortlessly. He doesn't find it particularly useful, as he can regenerate limbs faster without it. The professor, recognizing Xenos' brilliance, implores him to join his research lab. Xenos declines politely, while Crescent seethes over the attention he receives. Later that day, word of an extraordinary student reaches Goldrin. Reports claim the boy can vanquish 30 ghosts simultaneously. Goldrin dismisses it as hearsay, until he's informed of increased undead activity in the cemetery. Goldrin devises a test. He'll dispatch Xenos to handle the graveyard exorcism. If the boy meets expectations, then he'll consider recruiting him. That night, Xenos joins the assigned exorcism unit, including Crescent, who leads the group into battle. They are quickly overwhelmed and encircled, with Crescent on the verge of panic. Just as the ghosts close in, Xenos casts a high-level heal, eradicating all enemies in a single strike. Xenos commends the group for effectively drawing in the ghosts, allowing him to eliminate them. Before he can finish, Crescent arrogantly claims credit for the high heal spell. The other students, unaware of the truth, believe him. Crescent urges them to report his supposed heroism to their instructors. He then approaches Xenos and boldly declares he will never acknowledge his abilities. Xenos remains indifferent to Crescent's petty posturing. Still, if Crescent insists on hogging the glory, he shouldn't leave just yet, because the threat isn't over. Perplexed, Crescent questions him, but moments later, the earth ruptures and a zombie king emerges. The students are stunned by the appearance of such a powerful entity. Though they express confidence in Crescent's abilities, none of them are willing to assist, choosing instead to spectate under the guise of not wanting to interfere. To his credit, Crescent does attempt to fight. He casts his strongest healing spell, but it's ineffective. Outmatched, he resorts to evasion, unwilling to admit defeat despite his obvious disadvantage. Meanwhile, Umine informs Xenos that powerful undead draw lesser ones, implying the earlier ghosts were summoned by the Zombie King's presence. Xenos suspects an even deeper cause. As Crescent begins to suffer under the Zombie King's assault, Xenos considers intervening. Umine, though still concerned for Crescent, urges him to wait. She hopes Crescent learns something from this ordeal. Crescent has managed to endure by continually healing himself each time he's hurled against a wall. However, he eventually gets seized by the Zombie King and is moments from being devoured. At last, Xenos intervenes. He prepares one of his most potent spells and, once ready, unleashes Mega Heal. A radiant burst of light engulfs the creature, incinerating its decayed flesh with overwhelming healing magic. With the zombie obliterated, the mission concludes, yet Umain's earlier remark about undead being drawn to stronger entities lingers in Xenos' mind. He soon deduces that both the ghost horde and the zombie king appeared because of Carmilla. Upon returning home, he asks Carmilla if she knows anything about the recent surge in undead activity nearby. Truthfully, she had no idea she was attracting such creatures. She nervously asks Xenos if he plans to evict her because of it. Xenos considers it carefully. Given Carmilla's influence on the environment, he concludes it's actually safer for everyone if she stays close to him. Carmilla blushes. This is the first time in her undead existence that someone has ever wanted her around. She vows to remain by Xenos' side, though she'll still tease him whenever possible. The following day, Crescent meets with his superior, who commends him for his remarkable performance during the exorcism. Other students claimed Crescent managed the entire incident with a single spell. However, Crescent knows it was Xenos who defeated the undead. Since Crescent received all the praise, his superior assumes Xenos isn't as capable as rumored and decides he won't qualify for Goldrin's group. Crescent could stay silent and retain the credit, but guilt overwhelms him. He admits he wasn't the one who eliminated the undead, or the zombie king, Xenos did, and he witnessed it himself. After leaving the office, Crescent is frustrated. His reputation has taken a severe blow for confessing the truth. But Xenos saved his life. Now that the truth is out, he's certain Xenos will be accepted into the research lab. In his mind, they're even. Shortly after, Ernardo joyfully informs Xenos that Goldrin's lab has summoned him. It appears he's been invited to join their faction. Xenos is pleased, though slightly surprised. He had assumed Crescent would claim all the credit for the exorcism. Regardless, he's relieved to have cleared the first hurdle in his investigation of Goldrin. Ernardo informs him there's still much to do. Xenos must undergo an interview with the professor. Xenos questions why so many steps are required merely to join a research group. Given Galrin's immense influence, Ernardo explains, he's highly selective about his associates. Xenos then asks why Galrin holds such authority in the first place. If he's merely an advanced healer, shouldn't a high-ranking healer like Ernardo wield more power? Ernardo replies that titles don't always equate to influence, especially in his case, as his rank stems from pharmaceutical development. Xenos doesn't fully grasp the political intricacies, but he heads off, stating he'll respond now. The others wish him luck. Upon arriving at the meeting room, Goldrin introduces himself, then immediately asks Xenos what he's capable of. Xenos replies that he's a healer. He heals. Goldrin dismisses the answer, saying it's insufficient. Any healer can mend wounds. Someone of Xenos' caliber should aspire to more. He notes that healers possess immense sway in this country, so much so that the nation's very existence hinges on them, yet only the elite benefit from their labor. Goldrin confesses his ambition to join the ruling class, not for altruistic reasons, but to claim a share of that exploitation. To him, a life's worth is measured by its utility. He has no plans to aid the impoverished. After his soliloquy, he instructs Xenos to replicate the magic circle he demonstrated in class, so he can assess him properly. Xenos isn't sure what replicating a magic circle will prove, but complies regardless. After examining it, Goldrin rises and informs him he'll be joining the lab starting tomorrow. The following day, as Xenos walks through the corridor, members of Goldrin's lab pass by. At the rear, he spots Crescent, who tells him to hurry up and fall in line. Crescent greets him with a grin, welcoming him to the group, but reminds him that as the earlier member he deserves seniority. After all, Xenos was only accepted because Crescent recommended him. Xenos asks why Crescent told the truth, considering it would have been easier to lie and protect his reputation. Crescent admits it was partly guilt, but also strategy. He figured he could ride Xenos' success by joining the same lab. Xenos appreciates the honesty but shifts focus, asking why they're lined up like this. Crescent explains it's part of Goldrin's daily patient rounds. Xenos questions the need for such a crowd, but Crescent clarifies it's for show. Goldrin only visits influential figures, so appearances matter. Xenos came to investigate Goldrin, but being stuck in the rear won't help, so he rushes to the front. The patient complains of severe foot pain since yesterday. Upon examination, Goldrin diagnoses a minor sprain and states only 3 subordinates are required for treatment. Xenos doesn't understand until Goldrin casts a spell, drawing energy from 3 students and channeling it into the patient's ankle. The students appear drained afterward. Perplexed, Xenos rushes back to Crescent and asks about the technique. Crescent explains that Goldrin's specialty is health transference magic, spell work that reallocates life force from one individual to another. It enables the caster to mend severe injuries even without immense power. For instance, if someone's hurt, another's life force can be channeled into them to accelerate recovery. However, grave wounds demand significantly more vitality, so the burden is typically distributed among several individuals. Most experience only mild fatigue as a side effect. Xenos finds the concept intriguing and notes it clarifies Goldrin's fixation on surrounding himself with healers. Crescent, however, reveals that's only part of the motivation. Rumors suggest the current director scholar is nearing retirement, and Goldrin is consolidating support ahead of the upcoming succession. Xenos thanks Crescent for his thorough responses, then inquires whether he's heard of someone named Alfred. Crescent affirms but admits he's not fond of him. Alfred received an invitation to one of Goldrin's exclusive dinners, and vanished immediately afterward. Xenos asks what kind of dinner party it was. Crescent explains Goldrin frequently hosts such events for favored subordinates. Receiving an invitation is considered prestigious, yet Alfred disappeared following one, and no one has seen him since. Xenos later shares this intel, believing the investigation is nearing completion, but Bernardo insists otherwise. While it implicates Goldrin in Alfred's disappearance, it falls short of definitive proof. He needs Xenos to become one of Goldrin's inner circle and gain access to a dinner party to uncover the truth. He even offers Xenos additional compensation if he succeeds. So, despite wishing to return home, Xenos consents to remain and continue the investigation. Regardless of the outcome, he insists Bernardo disclose everything he knows about his master once the mission concludes. Meanwhile in the slums, Linga is busy picking the lock to Xenos' clinic. She eventually gains entry, intending to tidy up the place during his absence, though she takes the liberty to sniff around his belongings. Suddenly, she senses another presence and braces for combat, only to find it's Zofia. They exchange questions about each other's presence, and Linga quickly notices Zofia holding a mop, indicating she had the same intention. Moments later, Lo kicks the door open, declaring she's also there to clean for Xenos. Zofia and Linga, half expecting her arrival, wish she hadn't destroyed the door, which only added to their workload. The next day in the capital, Xenos meets Crescent, who informs him he's been granted the honor of caring for Goldrin's cherished dog. In truth, Crescent is simply passing off his own pet-sitting duties. Xenos questions whether Crescent is genuinely a researcher if these are his tasks. Crescent explains Goldrin is currently meeting with the 7 influential nobles whose favor he's been courting, hence the dog sitting. Still, Crescent doesn't mind, convinced that performing favors for Goldrin is his ladder to the faction's summit. Xenos asks if Crescent genuinely expects a promotion. Crescent replies that personal advancement is his sole motivation. If promoted, he'll ascend into the nation's elite and indulge in as much luxury as he desires. Xenos expresses confusion, assuming healers pursued the craft to save lives. Ideally that would be true, but Crescent explains reality differs. He once dreamed of curing ailments and helping others, but his healing magic has limitations. Since he can't save everyone, he now seeks to leverage his abilities for wealth. Just then, a man named Bonds approaches, asking if Crescent is stuck with Goldrin's dog again. Crescent responds he's simply fulfilling his obligations, but Bonds retorts that sycophancy alone won't get him anywhere. After Bonds walks away, Xenos inquires who he is. Crescent explains that Bonds is Goldrin's first secretary. Xenos finds it hard to believe someone so careless holds such a position. Crescent shares the disbelief but explains Bonds secured the role through old ties with Goldrin and contributes little. Suddenly Bonds yells Crescent's name, he must have overheard the insult, and hurls a bottle at him. Fortunately, he's too intoxicated to aim properly and misses, but the bottle lands near Goldrin's dog, startling her. Terrified, Madame Milk bolts. Crescent panics. Losing her would be a death sentence. He chases after her, but as Milk darts into the street, a carriage speeds by and hits her. Crescent rushes to her mangled form and desperately attempts to heal her injuries. Even with high-tier spells, it's insufficient to restore Madame Milk's flattened body. Cetus assures Crescent there's no need to panic. His healing stopped Milk's bleeding, so she'll survive. But Crescent insists that's not enough. Even if Milk lives, she'll be scarred, and Goldrin only values her pristine, fluffy appearance. Once he finds out Crescent is finished, unwilling to let Crescent face ruin, Xenos raises his hand and begins healing Milk. Crescent warns it's futile. Even if Xenos has the magical force to defeat a zombie king, regenerating skin requires refined technique, usually beyond average healers. But as Crescent rambles, Xenos finishes the healing. Milk is completely restored with no trace of injury. Even her fractured ribs are repaired, though Xenos suggests she rest for the day. Later, Xenos returns home and finds Human waiting. Concerned, he asks if something's wrong. She simply invites him for a walk. Though surprised, he agrees. In the woods, he asks if there's something she wants to say. She turns to him and apologizes. If she weren't so weak, she might have caught Goldrin's attention, and Xenos wouldn't have been dragged into the situation. Xenos assures her there's no need to apologize. Becker is compensating him, and besides, without this opportunity, he never would have set foot in the Royal Hospital or uncovered more about his master. There's much to gain from this, so she needn't feel any guilt. Relieved, Human admits she doesn't know much about this master he often references, so she asks what kind of person he was. Xenos replies he's unsure. His master was rather secretive. Still, he taught him to read, write, and everything he knows about healing and the world. Xenos owes him everything. Human reflects on her own experience, saying it's similar with Bernardo. When she first became a healer, he took her in and mentored her in all aspects of his research. Admittedly, Bernardo's obsession with work drove his girlfriend away, so Yuman has cared for him since. That sounds somewhat dubious, so Zenos asks Yuman about her connection to Bernardo. She explains Bernardo is her uncle, which accounts for their closeness. Shortly after, as Zenos and Yuman return to the royal hospital grounds, Crescent rushes toward them. He drops to his knees, desperately pleading for Zenos' aid, having landed himself in a dire predicament. Judging by Crescent's expression, Zenos can tell the situation is severe. Goldrun returned to his office after a leisurely lunch with Lord Fennel. His second assistant greeted him, but Goldrun quickly noticed something was amiss. When asked if anything had gone wrong during lunch, Goldrun replied that the meal itself was uneventful. However, during their conversation, Lord Fennel had mentioned that his daughter was suffering from a peculiar facial rash, and inquired if Goldrun could help. Goldrun pondered briefly and surmised that it was lightly odd-face disease. Though not life-threatening and expected to resolve on its own, if Fennel's daughter wanted immediate results, he would need to excise the affected skin. Unfortunately, such a procedure would leave a prominent scar, something she pertinently wouldn't tolerate. He knew the scar could be prevented using regenerative healing magic, provided there were enough donors, but Fennel's daughter was reportedly so self-conscious that she avoided being seen altogether. At most, Goldrun might convince her to allow one or two assistants to assist, no more. This situation deeply distressed Lord Fennel, who decided to soothe his anxiety by visiting his beloved dog, Milk. On his way to her room, Goldrun passed by Bonds, who jokingly remarked that Milk had been run over by a carriage. Furious, Goldrun immediately suspected Bonds was involved. Bonds urged him to calm down, explaining that the dog-sitter walking Milk at the time had already healed her and she was fine. Goldrun let Bonds off the hook and hurried to Milk's room. To his astonishment, Milk was indeed unharmed, slightly fatigued but with no visible injuries or scarring. He was stunned. Someone had completely healed Milk without leaving any trace, and since Crescent had been assigned to watch her, he believes Crescent was the one responsible, which brings us back to Crescent's predicament. Bolden had requested that he treat Lord Fennel's daughter, but Crescent lacks the necessary ability. He confides in Zenos that Fennel's daughter is afflicted with odd-face, though Zenos dismisses the concern. Odd-face is a mild condition that resolves naturally with time. Crescent knows that, but Fennel's daughter refuses to appear in public while her appearance is compromised, so a swift solution is essential. When Zenos asks why he doesn't simply excise the lesion, Crescent explains the roots run too deep. Surgical removal would result in severe facial scarring, and disfiguring the daughter of one of the 7 most influential nobles would be tantamount to social suicide. Human questions why Gold would assign such a critical case to Crescent in the first place. Crescent reveals that Gold assumed he had healed Milk and attributed the miracle to him. Human suggests he clarify that it was actually Zenos who healed the dog, but Crescent fears that admitting he once again took credit for Zenos' work could lead to his dismissal. That's why he's desperate for Zenos' assistance to ensure the operation's success. At that moment, Lely arrives, offering tea, and introduces herself as Zenos' younger sister. Crescent is taken aback. He had no idea Zenos had such an adorable sibling. Lily blushes at the compliment but gently informs him that she already belongs to Zenos, so no matter how flattering he is, she cannot be with him. That wasn't Crescent's intent with the compliment, so he assures Lely that given how close he and Zenos are, he's practically family already, making her his little sister too. However, Zenos never consented to be considered Crescent's brother. The following day, Gold escorts Crescent to Lord Fennel's estate, and Crescent brings Zenos along. When Fennel finally arrives to greet them, he appears visibly distressed and informs Goldrun that the situation has grown more complicated. His daughter, Charlotte, is now adamantly refusing any form of surgical intervention. Charlotte insists she will not allow her flawless face to be marred. Fennel, however, remains confident in Goldrun's capabilities and implores him to persuade her. Goldrun agrees, and they proceed to Charlotte's chambers. Fennel makes the first attempt, assuring Charlotte that her beauty will remain intact and that she can trust him, as he's never lied to her. But Charlotte promptly recalls the time he promised her a fox fur coat for her birthday and gave her nothing instead. Though the fault wasn't entirely Fennel's, he cannot deny breaking that promise, rendering his persuasion ineffective. Goldrun then steps forward and informs Charlotte is a professor at the Royal Hospital, assuring her of the operation's success. Yet Charlotte remains unconvinced, suspecting Goldrun might have been hired by someone to deliberately ruin her face. As Goldrun and Fennel continue attempting to reassure her, Crescent becomes lost in absurd daydreams, believing that if he miraculously heals Charlotte, she might fall for him. Zenos, unimpressed, doesn't even bother refuting the fantasy. Crescent requests Lord Fennel's permission to address Charlotte directly and introduces himself as Goldrun's assistant. But Charlotte instantly responds that his voice is irritating and that he has no right to speak to her. Since everyone else had failed, Goldrin asks Zenos to speak with her. Determined, Zenos approaches the door, introduces himself as an assistant, and before Charlotte can dismiss him he interrupts, stating he wishes to discuss the surgery. He tells her it's perfectly valid to fear surgery, after all no one wants their face cut open. Besides, Oddface isn't fatal, at worst it could result in a grotesque mole resembling an elderly woman's face. Having said his piece he turns to leave. But Charlotte halts him, clearly unnerved by the idea of a mole resembling an old lady. She agrees to let everyone enter and asks if what Zenos said was accurate. Crescent attempts to respond but Charlotte immediately silences him, still annoyed by his voice. Goldrin then confirms that in prior Oddface cases, after a month the condition tends to develop into moles shaped like aged women's faces. Horrified, Charlotte begs to know if there's a way to remove it. Goldrin explains that regrettably, surgical excision is the only method. Still, Charlotte hesitates, fearing the procedure might fail. Fennel reminds her that inaction will only allow the blemish to grow, and she should place her trust in Goldrin. She asks if he can promise there will be no scarring, but Goldrin admits he cannot guarantee that, as he won't be the one performing the operation. Distressed, Charlotte flees, declaring she won't consent until someone guarantees total success. Later, Zenos finds her on her veranda, quietly enjoying the company of several birds. He then notices one of them is injured. Charlotte explains she discovered the bird in the garden earlier, and given the severity of its injuries, it likely will never fly again, just like her, now that her face is disfigured. She believes she'll no longer attend parties or dance as she once did, and soon no one will remember her at all. Zenos asks if she truly wishes to recover, and she screams that of course she does, but she refuses to be left with scars, so he should stop discussing it. However, while Charlotte was yelling, Zenos had already healed the bird's wing, and it now soars as if it had never been injured. Stunned by his effortless work, Charlotte is speechless. Zenos assures her he can do the same for her, stating that whether one is noble, commoner, or peasant, if they're in need, he'll do all he can, because that is his duty as a healer. His words persuade Charlotte that he genuinely understands his craft, so she chooses to trust him and consents to the procedure. Once she is sedated, Fennel steps out and entrusts her care to Goldrin. But Goldrin has no intention of operating. He's already delegated the surgery to Zenos and Crescent, though he still intends to claim the credit. He warns Crescent not to botch it. Seeing Crescent visibly shaken, Zenos offers to handle the operation himself. Grateful, Crescent asks if Zenos has ever done such a procedure. And while he technically has, back in his youth, he's still more qualified than Crescent. Just as he's about to assume control, Goldrin intervenes, insisting Crescent must perform the surgery, forcing Zenos to assist. With trembling hands, Crescent picks up the scalpel and attempts to begin. He's familiar with the procedure from his hospital training and tries to follow protocol, but Zenos halts him to conduct a body scan. Crescent, bewildered, watches as Zenos explains that he's examined Charlotte internally, and now knows the exact locations of the wart roots, eliminating the need for blind incisions. The surgery proceeds seamlessly under Zenos' guidance, but as Crescent prepares to sever the final root, he uncovers a grave complication. Argus has entwined itself around Charlotte's facial nerves. Severing it would necessitate cutting those nerves, which would alter her appearance. Since regenerating nerves is notoriously complex, Crescent proposes closing the incision and transferring her to the Royal Hospital for specialized care. However, Goldrin, preoccupied with preserving his reputation, refuses. He had assured Fennel that he would eliminate Charlotte's growths, and doing so now would require damaging her facial nerves. A responsible physician would have heeded Crescent's warning and prioritized the patient's well-being. Instead, Goldrin, ever duplicitous, seizes Crescent's arm and forcibly compels him to cut the final root, along with Charlotte's nerve. Goldrin then feigns outrage, shouting theatrically and pretending Crescent acted independently. Stunned into silence, Crescent cannot defend himself. Upon hearing the commotion, Fennel rushes in and Goldrin loudly accuses Crescent of having severed Charlotte's facial nerve, claiming she will now be permanently disfigured. Such an allegation could destroy Crescent's future, and Goldrin is entirely unbothered. But Zenos refuses to remain silent, especially when Charlotte herself turns to him for aid. He firmly tells Fennel that Goldrin is exaggerating and that the severed nerve is reparable. Declaring his frustration at standing idle, Zenos shoves past Goldrin, draws his scalpel, excises the remaining root, and flawlessly restores Charlotte's nerves using his advanced healing magic. The surgery proceeds seamlessly under Zenos' guidance. Hours later, Charlotte regains consciousness in her bed, and her father is relieved to see her awake. Before any embraces, she insists on seeing her face. She grabs a mirror, and the moment she catches her reflection, she breaks into tears. The growths are completely gone. Goldrin had claimed full credit for the procedure, and Fennel sincerely believes he was the one who healed his daughter. Goldrin had departed immediately post-surgery, citing urgent obligations related to the hospital election, and Fennel, in gratitude, pledged his full political backing. However, Charlotte harbors doubts about Goldrin's integrity. During the operation, she distinctly recalls hearing Xenos' voice reassuring her that everything would be fine. She's certain he was her true savior, and she'll never forget it. Later, Xenos is assisting Human carry numerous vials from Bernardo's laboratory. She explains they're the latest concoctions, though she has no idea what any of them actually do. While they organize the storage room, Crescent bursts in with major news. Both he and Xenos have been invited to one of Goldrin's exclusive dinner parties. It sounds like a promising opportunity, but Human quickly picks up on Crescent's unease. He claims to be excited, but he's clearly hesitant about associating with Goldrin after the last incident. Still, the event could open the door to a major promotion, so he resolves to attend. With the party scheduled for tonight, Crescent tells Xenos he'll meet him in the lobby. Goldrin's soiree commences, and once his guests are seated, he announces that he's secured Lord Fennel's endorsement, virtually ensuring his election as the Royal Hospital's new director by month's end. Applause erupts for Goldrin. Despite Crescent's earlier reluctance, he's thrilled to be present. It's a prime opportunity to mingle with the elite attendees Goldrin invited. While Crescent socializes, Xenos discreetly probes for intel about Alfred. He eventually learns that during the last banquet, Alfred was seen attending to Bonds. Xenos approaches Bonds, inquiring if he remembers meeting someone named Alfred that evening. Bonds recalls Alfred. While others networked, Alfred had brought him a glass of water. Bonds found him odd yet endearing. He was the only one who noticed him, unlike Goldrin's students, who shun Bonds due to Goldrin's claims that he's a compulsive liar. Xenos finds it odd that Goldrin slanders Bonds, considering he appointed him first secretary. Lily questions why Bonds received such a prestigious post despite his lack of responsibilities. Bonds replies that he and Goldrin are old friends, but when she asks how they met, Bonds snaps, demanding she leave him alone, claiming he doesn't remember. Realizing Bonds is too inebriated for credible info, Xenos considers abandoning the effort. However, Lely suspects Bonds is hiding one of Goldrin's secrets. She asks a waiter for several bottles of wine, intending to loosen Bonds' tongue. Over the next few hours, she flatters him relentlessly, plying him with drinks as he rambles about himself. Bonds ends up utterly intoxicated. Just as Lely had hoped. Though her scheme seems effective, Xenos grows uneasy. Surprised that someone as innocent as Lely could devise such a cunning tactic, Lely remarks that she picked up the tactic from Carmela, and though Xenos resents Carmela for corrupting Lely with underhanded schemes, this one happened to work. He shifts focus back to Bonds, asking if he recalls what became of Alfred after their last encounter. Bonds, now barely lucid, mutters that Alfred escorted him outside for air. Hoping to jog his memory, Xenos replicates the scene, guiding Bonds out for fresh air. En route, Bonds stumbles and drops his wine, but instead of reacting with annoyance, he bursts into nostalgic laughter, mistaking Xenos for Goldrin. The slip prompts a flood of memories. He recalls the pivotal day, 13 years ago, that changed everything. Xenos, sensing an opportunity, plays along, impersonating Goldrin to extract more information. Bonds reminisces that Goldrin's research had reached an impasse, but a mysterious explosion altered his fortunes. With Lord Fennel's patronage, Goldrin ascended to professorship at the Royal Hospital, and is now poised to become its next director. Bonds then collapses into slumber on the ground. Frustrated at the abrupt halt just as the revelations were getting critical, Xenos resigns to the fact there's nothing more to extract. He informs Lely that Bonds must be handed over to a caretaker and suggests they take a short reprieve. When Lely asks if the information-gathering phase is over, Xenos admits they're still missing a crucial link. At that moment, Carmela suddenly emerges from behind a couch, startling Xenos, especially given the room is filled with healers. Carmela, however, insists that it's more entertaining to be a nuisance when danger looms. Having eavesdropped on Bonds ranting, she believes she can offer some clarity on the situation. Meanwhile, back in the slums, Zafia and the others grow despondent over Xenos' prolonged absence. Ordinarily, they'd be quarreling over territorial rights. But without Xenos around, there's little point in conflict. Suddenly, one of Zofia's men bursts in, frantic. There's been a severe accident. While Zahn and a few others were working on a construction site, a pillar collapsed and impaled Zahn through the abdomen. The messenger is drenched in Zahn's blood, confirming the situation is dire. With Xenos still absent, Zofia knows Zahn won't survive if they wait. Linga suggests retrieving Zahn and bringing him to Xenos immediately, but Zofia hesitates. Xenos is undercover at the Royal Hospital, and exposing him could jeopardize the mission. Still, Linga and Lu insist Xenos would be more devastated if someone died during his absence. Meanwhile, at the Royal Hospital, Carmela shares a rumor she picked up. 13 years ago, an explosion occurred, and Lord Fennel was caught in the blast. Despite the destruction, he emerged completely unscathed and has since owed his rise to Goldrin. The assumption is that Goldrin saved his life. However, given the alleged damage, Fennel should have sustained critical injuries, possibly requiring full body restoration. Xenos notes that such restoration is feasible as long as the heart remains intact, but he doubts Goldrin possessed the skill. Lely theorizes that another healer intervened and restored Fennel, but before Fennel regained consciousness, the real healer disappeared, allowing Goldrin to claim the credit and leverage Fennel's gratitude to ascend the hospital ranks. She further speculates that Bonds witnessed the event and has been blackmailing Goldrin with the knowledge, when Alfred tended to Bonds at the last banquet. Bonds may have unknowingly revealed the truth. Fearing retaliation, Alfred likely went into hiding, suspecting Goldrin might silence him. Crescent enters, saying he's been searching for Lely. He just met several influential figures and wants to introduce her. Lely replies she has no interest in politics and prefers to spend time with Xenos. Still, since Crescent insists, she reluctantly agrees to accompany him. Once Lely departs, Carmela turns to Xenos, asking if he's considered another possibility regarding the explosion. Lely's theory holds weight, but based on Carmela's description, Fennel couldn't have been the sole casualty. A crowd was caught in the blast, yet only one survivor emerged. A noble with connections. Coupled with knowledge of Goldrin's life transfer technique, it suggests he may have siphoned the life force from the wounded to save Fennel, sacrificing dozens for one. While not legally a capital offense in this kingdom, the moral weight disgusts Xenos. It's plausible Alfred uncovered this truth, prompting his disappearance. Carmela asks Xenos what he intends to do with this knowledge. He replies he'll simply report it to Renardo and move on. Judgment isn't his role. As he exits and returns to the party, he notices guests gathered near the windows. Xenos asks Crescent what's happening, who explains there's a disturbance at the front gate. Looking out, Xenos sees Human confronting the guards who deny her entry without Goldrin's invitation. Human insists it's urgent, she must speak with her friend immediately. Lou then spots Xenos in the crowd and calls out to him, prompting Zofia to scold her for drawing attention and jeopardizing Xenos' cover. Lou apologizes, but Zahn's condition is deteriorating rapidly. They can't afford subtlety. Once Goldrin is informed, he demands an explanation for the presence of filthy demi-humans at his estate and promptly orders his guards to expel them. In a flash, Linga disables the guards, and Lou strides in with Zahn slung over her shoulder. She urgently calls out to Xenos, prompting murmurs throughout the hall. Guests whisper, questioning if Xenos truly associates with demi-humans. Xenos disregards them and asks Lou what happened. She explains that Zahn was critically injured in a construction accident. They rush to the Royal Hospital dorms to find Xenos but encountered Human instead. After explaining the situation to her, she directed them here. Goldrin storms over, demanding to know Xenos' connection to the demi-humans. Xenos ignores him, declaring he's going to help. Goldrin warns that aiding them will destroy any chance of being among the chosen under divine authority. Xenos, unmoved, states he has no interest in elite circles. He's a healer, and healers serve those in need. He bids farewell to Crescent and tells Lely it's time. Then, lifting her, he vaults over the balcony to the ground floor. Crescent silently watches Xenos disappear and questions how someone could abandon such a promising future. Goldrin approaches, warning him not to follow in Xenos' footsteps and threatening to blacklist him from the hospital. Crescent outwardly agrees it would be reckless to defy Goldrin. Yet deep down, he recalls how Xenos treated everyone equally, noble or stray, and how Goldrin would betray anyone for power. That isn't the path he wants to follow. Crescent decides to follow Xenos' example and leaps from the balcony to assist with healing. However, by the time he arrives, Xenos has already mended Zahn's wound. Realizing his help was unnecessary, Crescent feels foolish for abandoning his future in vain. Iman calls him an idiot for sacrificing his career for nothing, but admits his earlier words were the most dignified she's ever heard from him. Despite finding him irritating, she's proud to call him a friend. The following morning, Xenos briefs Renardo on everything he uncovered regarding Goldrin's secret. Renardo recalls Alfred once mentioning a childhood accident. He must have been one of the explosion's survivors. Given that Goldrin likely orchestrated the blast, Renardo suspects Alfred may attempt to retaliate during Goldrin's upcoming victory celebration. In that case, Renardo insists on attending the event himself. Still, he thanks Xenos for the invaluable intelligence he's provided. Xenos' mission is now officially complete. Xenos asks if Renardo is certain about letting him go, but that was always their agreement. Renardo just needs time to process the departure paperwork. Once completed, he'll share everything he knows about Xenos' master. In the meantime, Human suggests throwing a farewell gathering for Xenos. That evening, everyone assembles in Zemo's room. Crescent drowns his misery in liquor, unsure of his future without Xenos around. Lely and Iman scold him for being pathetic, but it does little to lift his mood. Xenos attempts to console him, reminding Crescent of his adaptability. He'll be fine anywhere. While Crescent appreciates the kindness, it doesn't ease his anxiety. He even begins to question his sanity, convinced he sees a wraith watching him through the wall. By morning, Xenos and Lely are ready to depart and say their goodbyes. Before they leave, Human hands Xenos a letter from Bernardo containing information about his master. But upon arriving at Bernardo's office to retrieve it, they discover something peculiar hidden in his desk. At that same moment, Bernardo has just annihilated everyone attending Goldrin's celebration. Moments earlier, Goldrin basked in the anticipation of becoming hospital director when the noble Fennel arrived, remarking it was fitting to see him finally attain the role he deserved. Goldrin thanked him, but the exchange triggered memories of the event 13 years ago that changed everything. A blast had erupted at a magical tool factory, and Goldrin, returning home after fruitless years of research, discovered a wounded noble among the debris. Hoping for future favor, he healed the man, unaware he was one of the nation's 7 high nobles. Shockingly, it was also the first time his health transfer spell had succeeded, though it had siphoned life from the other casualties. Unfortunately, Bonds had captured a photo of the event. To silence him, Goldrin offered him the role of his first secretary. As the memory fades, Ern approaches with wine to congratulate him. Goldrin scoffs, accusing him of trying to curry favor with the future director, but Ern shrugs off the mockery. Goldrin then shifts to Xenos, once a promising figure who ultimately let him down. He recalls inviting the boy to a formal dinner, only for him to leave midway to tend to injured demi-humans. Goldrin criticizes this, insisting a faction member cannot afford to place peasants above political optics. After all, in his eyes, not all lives hold equal worth. Soon, Fennel offers a toast in Goldrin's honor and begins recounting the story of how Goldrin saved him 13 years ago. Goldrin quickly stops him, claiming it's unnecessary. Fennel simply smiles, calling Goldrin modest for refusing to boast of past triumphs, and then urges him to take the stage. Goldrin believes he's at the pinnacle of his career, and raises his glass to toast a radiant future. Meanwhile, Xenos and Human discover a photograph in ERN's office depicting Goldrin siphoning life force from others to heal Fennel. Human notices a young Afrad in the image, and becomes convinced he seeks vengeance. But then, the face of a woman in the photo leaves her utterly stunned. Back at the party, Goldrin abruptly regains consciousness after being knocked out. Blood trickles from his mouth as he tries to comprehend the chaos. His guests are unconscious. Ern approaches as Goldrin stands in confusion. Ern calmly reveals that he laced the wine with a rare homemade toxin. Without immediate treatment, everyone will perish within the hour. Goldrin, having consumed a lesser dose, has 2 at most. Panicked, Goldrin demands an explanation. Ern states he's recreating the infamous accident from 13 years ago. Alarmed, Goldrin questions how he knows about it. Ern explains that Xenos uncovered a lead and spoke to Bonds. Though initially silent, a medicinal bribe and some alcohol loosened his tongue. Ern even found a surviving photograph, one Goldrin believed he had eradicated. The color drains from Goldrin's face. Ern reminds Goldrin that he once chose to save Fennel, sacrificing those he deemed expendable. Goldrin insists they would have died regardless. Ern counters that Afrad was among the injured and survived, but ERN's fiancée wasn't so fortunate. She died due to Goldrin's reckless use of health transfer magic. Now, Ern presents him with a choice. Among the poisoned guests, Goldrin can completely cure one. Ern dares him to choose who will he save, but Goldrin begins to scheme, convinced he can force the antidote out of Ern. Ern suddenly stuns Goldrin by drinking the poisoned wine himself, presenting Goldrin with a new dilemma. If he believes Ern possesses the antidote, he must choose to save him first. However, Goldrin doesn't trust him. Calculating the most beneficial outcome, he chooses to heal himself first, then Fennel, as it offers the greatest return. He begins draining life force from his own faction members. Ern warns that Goldrin now holds more vitality than any of them, and by sacrificing some, he could save multiple lives. Goldrin retorts that his life is far more valuable than theirs, enraging Ern. But before Ern can react, the poison begins to overwhelm him. At that moment, Xenos, Human, and Crescent burst into the hall. Horrified by the scene, Ern demands to know why they're there. Human explains she found the photograph in his desk and recognized his late fiancé. Fearing his intentions, she rushed over. Xenos quickly realizes the guests are all poisoned, and Ern begins recounting his sorrowful past. He explains that 13 years ago, he and his fiancée were aspiring healers, brimming with hope. When she was reported dead in the explosion, he was shattered. He buried himself and worked to cope with the grief, until a man named Afrad attended one of Goldrin's gatherings and revealed that her death wasn't caused by the blast. Enraged, Ern sought retribution, but Afrad vanished after disclosing the truth, leaving no evidence. That's when Ern recruited Xenos, hoping he'd uncover either Afrad or damning proof against Goldrin. Human pleads that his method is unjust, but before Ern can respond, Crescent interrupts, shouting that he'd also lose control if someone hurt his girlfriend, even though he doesn't have one. Still, he insists it's wrong to punish innocent bystanders for a past crime. He shouts at Ern, demanding how a healer could justify harming others. Zenos gently pats his back, saying he'll take over. He reminds Ern of the riddle he once posed. If gold, silver, and bronze coins fell from his pocket, which would he pick? Zenos now has his answer. He'd pick them all. He grew up with nothing. And likewise, he'll save everyone, regardless of worth. Ern panics, warning him there's nothing to gain. Zenos agrees, but says once this ends, Ern will be labeled a mass murderer, and Human will suffer the fallout. Human, emotional, asks if he's doing it for her. Zenos affirms, it's payback for the farewell party, the first time anyone was sad to see him leave. Ern insists he can't cure an unknown poison, but Zenos says there's no time to analyze it. He begins healing patients one by one. Ern points out that this only mitigates damage, not neutralizes it. But then he finds himself enveloped in Zenos' healing field and realizes his intent. Zenos explains most toxins are expelled naturally if the body can survive long enough. His goal is to help each patient endure until the poison leaves their system. It's a battle of stamina, his healing versus the toxin. Human and Crescent offer to help, and Zenos instructs them to focus on those in the weakest condition. Ern is stunned. The basic heal spell shouldn't last this long. Zenos simply replies that he never had formal training, so he doesn't know what's impossible. Ern begins speaking of his late fiancée, a healer who devoted her life to saving others. She was, he says, the finest person he ever knew. Everything Goldrin is not. Ern admits he couldn't stand the idea of a man like Goldrin becoming director and felt compelled to act. He begins to regret poisoning the guests and thanks Zenos for saving him from becoming a true monster. Zenos casually suggests he can show gratitude through financial compensation. Healing that many wasn't easy. One by one the guests awaken, the poison fully purged. But Goldrin remains afflicted. He demands Zenos heal him as well. Zenos refuses, stating he doesn't take orders. Frustrated, Goldrin turns to his faction's healers, but they recall, even in their dazed state, that he tried to drain their life force. They refuse to help. Zenos offers to heal him. For a price, he scribbles a fee with more zeros than Goldrin has ever seen. Outraged, Goldrin protests, claiming the treatment isn't worth the cost. Zenos replies it's goodbye then. Panicked, Goldrin relents and accepts the deal. Before Zenos can proceed, Fennel arrives and coolly informs Goldrin they'll discuss this matter in full later, making it clear he's about to lose everything. Soon after, Ern is imprisoned. Zenos and Human visit him. As always, Ern remains cheerful and aloof, surprised they received visitation approval so quickly. Zenos tells Ern he has connections within the Royal Guard. At that moment, Kish arrives. Assuming Zenos is using Ern as an excuse to see her, Zenos lets her remain in her delusion and turns to Ern, saying he still needs answers. Human asks if he truly poisoned the guests. Ern clarifies that he didn't, at least not intentionally. He merely concocted a formula to induce paralysis and unconsciousness, intending to recreate the incident from 13 years ago to force Goldrin's confession. However, when he began coughing blood, he realized something was wrong. Confident in his formula, he quickly deduced that someone else had laced the wine, someone watching from among the fallen. Ern believes Afrad is responsible and was present, waiting to observe the fallout. Human is relieved, thinking Ern is innocent, but he disagrees. Even after realizing the guests were genuinely poisoned, he was prepared to let them die for revenge. Kish says that with the current evidence and Zenos' backing, she can expedite his release. Human urges her to do so. As they leave, Ern stops Zenos and warns him. He suspects Afrad somehow survived despite Goldrin draining his life force, meaning he may no longer be human. Ern believes Afrad's goals go beyond revenge, and now that Zenos has interfered, he may become Afrad's next target. Zenos shrugs it off, saying if Afrad comes for him, he'll be met with an enormous invoice for all the chaos he's caused. With that, Zenos returns to his usual life, the underground healer who'll treat anyone or anything for the right price. Next.